Welcome back to the final part of What If Naruto Was Told About the Secret to the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Please remember to like and subscribe as it motivates me to upload more in the future, and as always, link to the fanfiction is in the description. Chapter 64. The Clone Army Marches. After passing through Kaminari no Kuni, Naruto and Yugito slowly made their way toward Shimo no Kuni. Their plan was to pass through Shimo no Kuni into Yu no Kuni before heading into Kami no Kuni and then going straight to Konoha. It took about 1 week to leave Kaminari no Kuni starting from Kumo. It took about 4 days to pass through Shimo no Kuni. Having mostly camped out for the past 2 weeks, neither of them were in the mood to sleep outdoors anymore. They decided to head into the nearest village. The small village was somewhat close to the border of Ta no Kuni, but Naruto wasn't overly bothered by this. Otogakure had been abandoned a while back. Several Anbu had led an assault on the village, only to discover that all of the shinobi and Orochimaru's experiments had disappeared without a trace. Glancing around at the basic wood structures, Naruto wondered if this village even had a name. There'd been no sign when they entered, and it didn't look like this place was large enough to be called a city or town. He could actually count the number of buildings this place had. 652. That was a relatively small number. This place probably wasn't even 10 kilometers in size. It might be more accurate to call it a village. I think we should first find a place to spend the night, Yugito said. After that, how about we get something to eat? Sounds like a plan to me. Naruto walked with his hands behind his head and eyed the people of the village. His smile slowly turned into a frown. Hey, is it just me, or do the villagers seem wary of something? Yugito paid closer attention to the villagers they passed. Many of them were rushing from place to place, looking at anyone and everyone they walked by. The two of them received a number of suspicious looks themselves. Naruto couldn't help but notice the dagger-like stares they got from passers-by. That said, no one came up to them. You're right, she said at last. Everyone seems nervous for some reason. What do you think is going on? Don't know. Naruto cocked his head to the side. But maybe after we get a place to stay and some grub, we can do a bit of investigating to find out. Yugito looked uncertain. I don't want to spend too much time here. We should be trying to get back to Konoha as soon as possible, but given the current situation, the reason these people are so tense could have something to do with those white people. Those were my thoughts exactly, Naruto said. The two of them quickly found a hotel to stay the night in, and then they headed off to find a place to eat. It didn't look like this place had that many eateries. Certainly, when compared to Konoha or even Kumo, this place was lacking. He guessed that was to be expected in such a small village. After looking around for a moment, they entered what appeared to be a pub. It looked like a normal building from the outside. At just a glance, it was the same kind of building as many of the others. The difference was that hanging over the door was a sign that read Ma's Grub and Pub, denoting just what this place was. As they walked in, Naruto took a quick glance around the interior, noting that it didn't have the dingy setting that some pubs he'd been to did. The well-lit room had several round tables that numerous people were sitting at. A couple of booths also lined some of the walls. He wouldn't say this place was big, but it did have a large enough space that it could probably fit at least 200 people and still have some space left over. There wasn't anyone present to greet them when they entered. Naruto and Yugito walked further into the pub to find a place to sit. Along the way, several people glanced at them with hard eyes. The suspicion present in the gazes of the pub's patrons set Naruto on edge. While none of these people were shinobi and therefore posed no threat, the fact that they would glare at two shinobi, whose headbands were on clear display, caused an uneasy feeling to settle in his stomach. He found a table close to the center of the room, which they decided on after some debate. Yugito wanted to sit in the furthest corner from the entrance, where they would have a clear view of the entire room, but Naruto vetoed that idea. If we sit where everyone else is, we'll be able to listen in on their conversation, Naruto explained. We might learn something. While Yugito wasn't keen on sitting so close to people who might turn hostile, her words, not his, she also recognized that he had a point. Thus the two of them chose a small table that could seat 4 and waited to see if someone would come to take their order. Hey, those two are ninja, aren't they? A voice said as they sat down, causing Naruto's ears to twitch. Yugito must have heard them too because she perked up. They've got those headbands, so they must be ninja, right? I think so, another voice murmured. You don't usually see ninja around these parts. Wonder what they're doing here. Maybe they're here to cause more trouble. Naruto cocked his head gently and strained his ears, not just listening to the conversation, but tracing the sound back to the owners. It sounded like the people talking were behind him. He couldn't tell where exactly, but that was unimportant. What he really wanted to know was why those two thought he and Yugito would be there to cause trouble. This small village had nothing worthwhile in it from what he'd seen. Causing trouble here would just be a waste of time. At that moment, Naruto decided to hail down a barmaid who was wandering between the tables. She was a plain girl. He wouldn't call her unattractive, but he wouldn't have called her gorgeous either. She had normal brown hair, light skin, and brown eyes. Her body was about what he'd expect from a civilian. In a small village like this, she'd probably be considered the flower of the village. "Excuse me," he said after the woman finished putting down some mugs on another table. "Could my friend and I have 2 jars of warm sake, please?" The woman appeared somewhat startled when she saw the headband, but she nodded a couple of seconds later. While curiously glancing between the two of them with a frown, she said, "Sure thing. Your sake will be out in just a minute." The barmaid drifted between tables and vanished through a door near the back. Naruto and Yugito didn't talk much during the wait. To be honest, they had run out of topics to discuss on the way to this village. Traveling for 2 weeks with nothing new to talk about meant they had basically exhausted all conversational topics. Most of their time not spent traveling had been spent sleeping together. That was okay. Naruto found he didn't always need to hold a conversation. Silence was good sometimes. "Here you are," the barmaid said as she came back, setting down 2 jars of sake and 2 drinking saucers on the table before them. "Thank you," Yugito said softly as she grabbed a jar and poured some for Naruto. The barmaid didn't respond to Yugito's thanks as she eyed the two of them. "You two are ninja, right? That's what those headbands are for, right?" While Yugito was a bit startled by how forward this woman was, Naruto, who had more experience with small-town bars like this thanks to Jiraiya, responded with a smile. "That's right. My friend is from Kumogakure, and I'm from Konohagakure. So you're both from different villages." The woman cocked her head to the side as she considered this. Then she shrugged. "Well, if you two are ninja, does that mean you're here because of the rumors about the white men?" While Yugito perked up, Naruto tried to maintain his nonchalance. He raised an eyebrow at the girl. "White men? You mean you haven't heard?" The barmaid's eyes flashed a bit as she leaned down and cupped a hand to her mouth. This forced Naruto and Yugito to lean in so they could listen. Rumor has it that a large army of white men were spotted marching through Tetsu no Kuni a few days ago. This is just a rumor. However, people have been saying that these white men are able to take on the appearance of other people. Someone said that one of his good friends had been acting a little strange recently, and it turned out that one of the white men had killed and replaced his friend. While Yugito appeared intrigued by that last statement, Naruto discarded it as a silly rumor that had been propagated by the first piece of information. Stories like that always came about whenever some interesting new rumor spread. It likely wasn't true. What probably was true was the first rumor about white men marching through Tetsu no Kuni. "When did this rumor start?" asked Naruto. "About a week ago," the barmaid said after thinking about it for a moment. "Word on the street is that the white men attacked and completely destroyed Tetsu no Kuni's samurai army before making their way south, but nobody knows if that's true or not." The word startled Naruto enough that he finally showed emotion on his face. His reaction seemed to amuse the barmaid. She giggled and, as if shocking him had been her goal, she departed with a sway in her hips that hadn't been present before. Naruto took a deep breath. "Do you think what she said is true?" asked Yugito. "Which part of what she said are you talking about?" asked Naruto as he took a sip of sake to calm down. "All of it." Grabbing one of the jars, Naruto poured Yugito some sake, and then took another sip from his own saucer. "The part about one of the white men replacing some random jabroni's friend is probably fake, but the part about these white men marching through Tetsu no Kuni is likely true." "What makes you say that?" asked a curious Yugito. Naruto didn't speak at first, instead choosing to collect his thoughts and remember what Jiraiya had taught him about information gathering. Whenever something happens that sends ripples across the elemental nations, it always invites people to tell tall tales in order to get a reaction out of others. People will do anything for those 15 minutes of fame. It's likely that someone heard about how the white men can transform into other people and made up a story about one transforming into his friend. However, since these white men would have no reason to do that, it is likely false. That said, a rumor like these white men marching through Tetsu no Kuni is too big to be false, so it's probably true. Yugito nodded as she took a slow sip of her sake. A quiet moment passed in the bar, at least between the two of them. Conversations were still going on all around them, and Naruto made sure to keep his ears open in case someone said something interesting. He did learn through some of the conversations that the story about someone's friend secretly being a white man was why the village was so wary. As the silence between them spread, Yugito seemed unable to maintain her silence. "What should we do about this?" she asked. "We might want to consider taking a detour," Naruto admitted after thinking about what they had learned. That woman said the army of white men was marching south from Tetsu no Kuni, which means it is heading toward Hai no Kuni. If we hurry, we can probably reach Tetsu no Kuni's border before this so-called army passes through. "Can't you just use your clones to do reconnaissance while we travel to Konoha?" asked Yugito with a strange look on her face. "Oh." Naruto blinked. "That's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that." Obviously. Yugito's response to his words was to roll her eyes and smile. XOX. Ta no Kuni was a land filled with numerous small mountains, rice paddies, and winding roads. Some forestry was mixed in between the rice paddies, roads, and mountains, but the amount of forest was nothing compared to Hai no Kuni and some of the other nations. This small nation had supposedly been taken over by Orochimaru at some point in time when he established Otogakur. Within this small nation, 16 shadows cut a path through the land. These shadows moved so swiftly that anyone passing would have seen nothing but several blurs. They'd been running non-stop for the past several days. Their destination was unknown to everyone but them. These shadows leapt through trees, ran along the ground, and even ascended over mountains in their path, cutting through the entire nation to reach Tetsu no Kuni in record time. The warm weather dropped as they moved closer to Tetsu no Kuni. Rice paddies were eventually replaced with snow. Tetsu no Kuni was a cold land. The trees were all frozen over, with no leaves hanging from their branches. It was surprising this place even had trees, but perhaps the snow would melt during the summer and provide nourishment for this seemingly dead vegetation. As one, the group suddenly stopped moving when the shadow in front sensed something up ahead. When the shadows stopped, it revealed who they were. All 16 figures looked identical. They had the same spiky blonde hair, blue eyes, and whisker marks on their cheeks. These figures were, of course, the shadow clones that Naruto had created. "I sense a lot of chakra signatures up ahead," the lead clone said. He had nicknamed himself Alpha since he was in charge. He called the rest of the clones Beta, followed by a number. "Should we check it out?" asked Beta 1. "Of course we should." Beta 4 rolled his eyes. "Isn't that why we were created?" "But what if it's not those white men?" asked Beta 2. "Given the number of chakra signatures, I do not believe this can be anything but that army of white men," Beta 14 said. "Let's find some higher ground," Alpha suggested. "It will give us a better vantage point to observe the moving chakra signatures." "Yes." All the betas responded. Tetsu no Kuni was covered in numerous large mountain ranges, some of which looked like they could pierce the sky. One particular geographical location, the Three Wolves Mountains, could be seen from a distance as they ascended one of the smaller mountains. However, it was so far away that it looked like nothing more than a speck. Actually, the fact that they could even see it from several hundred kilometers was a testament to its impressive size. However, there was something even more attention-grabbing than the Three Wolves Mountains. "Holy," Beta 6 mumbled. "Shit," Beta 9 finished. "Holy shit is right," Alpha thought, though he did not say anything out loud. He could understand why the others said that. Indeed, he felt much the same way. The sight before them was just that shocking. Far beneath their feet, marching forward at a slow but steady pace, was a large army of white figures. They were completely naked but seemed immune to the cold. While one half of their body looked mostly normal, the other half was twisted and distorted, resembling more of a plant than a person. This army was composed of the very same people who'd impersonated several Kumo ninja and caused trouble. How large do you think this army is? Asked Beta 4. Alpha did his best to calculate the size of the army, but it was really hard because this army was so large they couldn't even see all of it. They marched in a file of 5 lines, passing through the mountains, and there were so many that it was basically impossible to take a headcount of them. There's gotta be at least 50,000, Alpha muttered. However, I think there might be even more than that. So there's at least 50,000 of these white men, Beta 3 said as he bit his lip. Hey! Beta 8 suddenly pointed at something. Look at the front of their formation. Those people aren't white men. At his cry, all of the Naruto clones turned their attention to the front where, indeed, several individuals who were not white men marched as though leading this army. There were 5 of them. One of them was a man with white spiky hair and blue armor. The one next to him was an old man wearing an all-black ninja suit. Beside him was a man with spiky, silver hair that reached the middle of his back. There was a dark-haired man with tan skin and red armor. Finally, the last of this group was. Isn't that Dad? Asked a shocked Beta 11. Indeed, walking alongside the other 4 people was a man with spiky blonde hair similar to Naruto's own, bright blue eyes, and a Konoha headband. Underneath his white Hokage haori was the standard garb of a Jonin. He wore a green flak jacket over a blue shirt. His blue pants were wrapped in white bandages near the calves and disappeared into his shinobi sandals. The only difference between him and normal Jonin, aside from his haori, were the 2 bands on both sleeves. That is definitely our dad, Alpha said with a grim expression. How can this be? Asked Beta 4. I thought our dad was, you know. He is dead, Beta 7 said. Then, I heard that when that bastard Orochimaru was battling against old man Sarutobi, he summoned the first and second Hokages using some kind of jutsu, Alpha said. That must be what happened here. He frowned. That said, Ero Sennin also mentioned that the first and second Hokages had been sealed by the Shiki Fujin dead demon-consuming seal. It shouldn't be possible to summon them again, unless I'm missing something. As the Naruto clones all spoke, the army that had been marching suddenly paused. In that moment, Minato Namikaze glanced up at them. Alpha felt all the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. However, that feeling disappeared, along with him and the others, in less time than it took to blink. The mountain top was soon covered in smoke. XOX. Naruto and Yugito were racing through Hai no Kuni, leaping across tree branches like a couple of frogs jumping across patties in a lake. They moved swiftly, their figures nothing but streaks as they headed for Konoha. 2 days had passed since they left Unokuni. After spending a single night in that small village where they learned of the white men army, the 2 had decided to rush back to Konoha post-haste, though not before Naruto had created several shadow clones to check things out at Tetsu no Kuni. Neither of them had slept for those 2 days. While even most Jonin would have been exhausted by the pace they set, Naruto and Yugito were special cases and had far more stamina than the average ninja. As he landed on a branch and prepared to push off, several images flashed through his mind, penetrating his skull like bursts of lightning. The images were so surprising that Naruto actually slipped. He screamed as he fell from the tree and slammed head first into the ground. Whiteness blocked his vision for a second as pain overrode his ability to see. When the pain dulled, he discovered that he was lying on his back and staring at the canopy of trees. Are you okay? Asked Yugito as she landed on the ground beside him. Yeah, Naruto groaned as he sat up and pressed a hand to his face. I'm fine, but we need to hurry back to Konoha. I know that. No. Naruto shook his head. We really need to hurry. Yugito didn't respond to his words at first, perhaps sensing that something had changed between now and when he had made his inelegant headplant. She helped Naruto to his feet. The 2 of them soon took off again, but this time, they poured on even more speed. Are you going to tell me why we're in even more of a rush than before? Asked Yugito. My clones were all just destroyed, Naruto said after a moment of silence. All of them were destroyed in an instant. However, before they were destroyed, they managed to discover that a large army of those white men were marching through Tetsu no Kuni. Also what? Asked Yugito. Naruto's expression became increasingly grim. Also, the army is being led by the previous 4 Hokages and a man who looks a lot like Kakashi. XOX. After hearing about what they were up against, Yugito agreed that they needed to hurry. That was why she used the power of her Biju to increase her speed. Likewise, Naruto activated his hybrid mode. Together, the two of them blitzed through the forest as quickly as they could, reaching Konoha in record time. Upon reaching the village, the two of them didn't even bother checking in at the gate, and instead hurried to the Hokage's office. They raced up the stairs and barged into the office without even knocking. Kakashi, who'd actually been sleeping with his head on the desk, was so startled that he nearly fell off the chair. "Kakashi, we have an emergency," Naruto shouted. Regaining his composure, Kakashi glanced at Naruto and Yugito, studying their expressions and harried appearance. After nearly half a minute of this, he sighed. "Before you begin telling me about this emergency, why don't you both calm down? Naruto, you haven't changed back to your normal appearance, and Yugito, you are still covered in your Biju's chakra." The two of them were startled for a moment, but when they looked at each other, they saw that Kakashi's words were true. Yugito was covered in a thick blue cloak with two tails waving behind her. Meanwhile, Naruto's hair had turned red, his eyes were purple, he was sporting claws, and his whiskers looked jagged. After seeing what the other person looked like, Naruto and Yugito swiftly changed back into their normal appearance. Kakashi sighed. "I'm sure the village is in a panic right now thanks to you two." "Sorry about that, Kakashi." Naruto rubbed the back of his head, slightly sheepish, before settling down. "However, it really is an emergency. Given the number of emergencies we've been dealing with, I'm somehow not surprised." Kakashi rubbed his face. He looked even more haggard now than he had before. "Does this have something to do with those white men? I guess I shouldn't be surprised you figured it out," Naruto said. Told us that Konoha was infiltrated by them already." Kakashi nodded. "We managed to root them out once Sakura figured out that we could differentiate our shinobi from them based on the negative intent they leaked, but it did cause us a number of problems near the beginning." "Yeah, well, this is an even bigger problem," Naruto said before he began explaining to Kakashi what he'd already told Yugito. While Kakashi was at first surprised, the longer his report went on, the more shocked the man became. When Naruto described the white-haired man who was with the four Hokages, the normally calm shinobi was paler than Naruto had ever seen him. Kakashi took several deep breaths, but each one came with a shudder. The man seemed unable to calm down. Naruto wanted to ask what was wrong, but he held himself back. "When did your clones discover this army?" asked Kakashi. "It was about 3 days ago," Naruto said. "All right." Kakashi was silent for but a moment. "I'm going to call an emergency meeting between our top ninja and the ninja from Kumo and Suna. The situation you just described is indeed a dire one." Kakashi stood up and wandered over to the window. Naruto and Yugito glanced at each other, and then looked back at the current Hokage, who seemed to be having issues. Within this deep silence, Naruto stepped forward. "Is everything okay, Kakashi?" he asked. "Yes." Kakashi turned around. "Everything is fine. Naruto, go inform Temari that we're having a meeting and she's needed. Yugito, do the same for Darui. The meeting place will be the operations center in 30 minutes. While Naruto and Yugito were confused by the sudden change in Kakashi's demeanor, the two of them were smart enough not to say anything. They nodded and quickly parted ways to do as they were told. XOX. Naruto arrived at the operations center with Temari in tow. While it was called the operations center, a grand name that suggested it was used to conduct meetings regarding large-scale missions and such, it didn't really look that impressive from the outside. It was a squat, one-story building. The bricks used in its construction were red. Like most of the buildings, a lot of wood was also used to build it, including the roof. Naruto and Temari entered the operations center to discover that a good number of people had already gathered. Naruto recognized many of them like Shikaku Nara, Yamato, Inoichi Yamanaka, Choza Akamichi, Maeda Gai, and Shizune. Akane was with Yugito. Also present was Darui, the leader in charge of the Kumo forces stationed in Konoha. "I'm glad you two are finally here," Kakashi said as he eyed them. "Now we can start the meeting." The interior of the operations center was mostly just an empty space. In the center of the room was a large table that had an incredibly detailed map of the elemental nations. It was an impressive piece of work. Not only did it show where a good majority of the major and minor cities and towns were, but it revealed details such as elevation, mountains, caves, ravines, etc. Everyone was gathered around the table, so Naruto and Temari squeezed in beside Yugito and Akane. I received this information from Naruto just a little while ago, but it appears there is a large army heading toward Konoha, Kakashi revealed to everyone, causing a chill to enter the people present. Their faces became stiff as the copy ninja continued. According to his report, their numbers are no less than 50,000. Everyone glanced at each other in shock. What's more, the army is being led by 5 Konoha ninja who have been reincarnated using the Kuchiyos, Edo Tensai, summoning, impure world reincarnation. At those words, numerous bodies stiffened in shock, their backs going ramrod straight. Everyone knew about that jutsu, which had been used during the assault on Konoha back when Naruto was taking the Chunin exams. Edo Tensai is a powerful forbidden jutsu that binds the soul of a deceased person to a living vessel, restoring them as they were when they were alive in order to do their summoner's bidding. Shikaku rubbed his jaw. Because it is a forbidden technique, very few people know of it, and even fewer people can use it. What's more, it is strictly a technique of Konoha. That means, right, Kakashi nodded. It means the person who created this army and summoned these ninja is likely none other than Orochimaru. With all the trouble Orochimaru had given them lately, it was no wonder the ninja inside of the operations center listening to Kakashi were agitated. Naruto glanced at Shikaku, Inoichi, and the others. All of them had pale faces filled with concern and anger. Who are the people that Orochimaru has summoned this time? Asked Inoichi. The grave expression on Kakashi's face was more than enough to make everyone wary as he said, they've summoned the previous 4 Hokages and Tsukumo Hatake. An unsettling atmosphere pushed down on everyone. Tension filled the air like a thick fog. The news that an army of 50,000 was marching toward Hai no Kuni was grave enough, but adding the news that the 4 Hokages and a famous ninja with cage-level strength was leading them was like adding salt to an open wound. This is pretty bad news, isn't it? Asked Temari. Do we even have a plan of action to deal with this? We do. Well, kind of, Kakashi sighed, paused to collect his thoughts, and plunged on. Right now, Konoha does not have the kind of numbers required to fight against such a large army. The first thing we need to do is gather together more forces. I was hoping that you, Temari, and you, Darui, could inform the Kazekage and Raikage about what is happening and request them to send aid. From what Yugito said, it sounds like Kumo has experienced trouble with members of this army in the past few days, Darui said with a shrug. I'll send a messenger bird to Kumo and ask them to send forces to back us up. I know Gaara will definitely send help when I tell him about what's happening, Temari said as she crossed her arms. I'll use our messenger hawk, and then gather the forces we currently have stationed here. Do we know where the army is now? Asked Shikaku. Kakashi looked at Naruto, who realized what the man wanted and stepped forward. Everyone glanced at him as he took center stage. Using a shogi piece sitting next to the map, he placed it where Tetsu no Kuni was located. When my clones saw them, they were traveling through the mountains of Tetsu no Kuni. They were going south toward us. Given their current speed, I estimate they've reached the border of Hai no Kuni by now. He moved the shogi piece until it was sitting right on the border. That said, the reason they moved so slowly through Tetsu no Kuni is likely because of the rugged terrain and cold weather. Once they enter Hai no Kuni, their speed will probably increase. That's a reasonable assumption, Shikaku mumbled. In which case, they should reach Konoha in about 2 weeks. Even if they can move faster once they reach Hai no Kuni, an army that large can't move that fast, especially if they want to maintain their formation, which is the purpose of attacking with an army. Kakashi nodded. However, we don't want them to reach Konoha. We have to gather our forces and head out to meet them. That said, our forces are not nearly as large as this army's. We'd lose in a head-on battle. That's not even taking the ninja leading them into account, Shikaku muttered as his brow furrowed in concentration. 50,000 ninja is a tall order for any one village to defeat. However, leading them are the previous 4 Hokages. Minato Namikaze alone is a man who was capable of decimating entire armies by himself. Even if we could gather a force of 50,000, we would still lose. You do not need to worry about the 4 Hokages. Akane suddenly stepped forward. Everyone glanced at the redhead as she smiled, though most of the glances were merely curious. No one actually knew who she was aside from Kakashi and Shizune. Tsunade had decided to keep knowledge about Akane being the nine-tailed fox a secret. While a few people had seen her enter a sort of hybrid form, where her tails and ears were visible, during the battle against Kumogakure, most people had dismissed it as a unique transformation. After all, the Kyuubi was a monster of mass destruction. There was no way such a beast could be a beautiful young woman. I'm guessing you have a plan to deal with them? Asked Kakashi. If you do, I would be glad to hear it. With an elegant shrug of her shoulders, Akane smiled. It isn't really a plan. I was merely telling you that you can leave the 4 Hokages and Tsukumo to myself and Naruto. While Kakashi looked a little startled, the others in the room had the same expressions as someone who'd been sucker punched in the face. Choza, Inoichi, and even Darui, Tamari, and Yugito were gazing at her like she'd said something incredibly stupid. Are you saying that the two of you will fight the 4 Hokages on your own? Asked Shikaku with a frown. That's suicide. I'll admit that Naruto has grown incredibly powerful over the years, but that is a far cry from being able to contend with a Hokage. Kages are ninja whose power and skill greatly exceeds that of average jonin. I am perfectly aware of what a kage is. Akane gave the man a withering glare. That is why I can confidently state that Naruto and I can handle this. Shikaku glanced at Naruto, then Akane, and then Kakashi. The frown on his face grew. Naruto could almost see the fire jutsu igniting in his head as he created theories and possibilities regarding the redhead. He didn't think Shikaku would get close to the truth without being told, though. Even if he was a genius, it took a large leap to conclude that Akane was the very being who nearly destroyed Konoha when he was a baby. Are you certain the two of you can handle 4 cages? Asked Kakashi. What's more, there is also Tsukumo. My father might not have been a Hokage, but he was powerful enough to be a candidate for the position. If it weren't for his untimely demise, he might have actually become Hokage. You don't need to worry about that. Naruto backed Akane up. While it is true that in a normal battle between us and the Hokages, we might not stand a chance, those 5 are only here because of the Edo Tensei. Aside from being a kinjutsu, it is also a highly advanced fuinjutsu. I'm positive I can create a counter jutsu to eliminate the summoning. I just need to get my hands on the scroll and study it. While some of the people present didn't look pleased that Naruto wanted to view the scroll with the Edo Tensei on it, Kakashi nodded. The jutsu is actually located in the Scroll of Seals. I'll lend it to you so you can study the technique and create a countermeasure. Let us say that Naruto and Akane do manage to counter the Hokages, Yugito began. That still leaves the army of 50,000. Even I wouldn't be able to defeat that many ninja, and Jinchuriki were created for the express purpose of decimating armies. Fortunately, I do not think we need to worry about that, Naruto said. While I don't know what abilities these strange white men have, I can tell you they are not frontline fighters. They will probably have some unique jutsu, but aside from that, they shouldn't be powerful enough to contend with a Jinchuriki. Naruto paused and cocked his head to the side. Of course, 50,000 ninja is still a tall order, and knowing Orochimaru, he's probably modified these people to have unique abilities that could contend with a Jinchuriki. It will be important to provide you with support. Before anyone else could say anything, Kakashi suddenly spoke up. Regardless of what plans we create, right now the most important thing is gathering our forces and heading out. Shikaku, I'm leaving the logistics and tactics to you. Come up with a suitable plan to counter this army. Any plan I make will be dependent on whether or not Suna and Kumogakure can send reinforcements, but I'll do my best. Shikaku nodded. In the meantime, I want everyone else to prepare for battle. I'll be giving you your orders when our plans formalize. Everyone nodded at Kakashi's words. The man currently in charge looked at Naruto and gestured to him. Naruto, follow me. I'm going to give you the Scroll of Seals. Learn everything you can about the Edo Tensei and come up with a countermeasure. You can count on me, Kakashi, Naruto stated with confidence. The meeting soon adjourned. Everyone went their separate ways to fulfill the orders Kakashi had given them. Naruto followed Kakashi as the man led him back to the Hokage's office, his mind focused on learning everything he could about the forbidden jutsu that had a hand in taking Sarutobi Hiruzen's life. XOX. The sun had long since gone down, but Naruto was still working hard, sitting at a table inside of the Hokage's mansion as he pored over the scroll of seals. This scroll contained many techniques, including the Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, multiple shadow clone jutsu, and the Hake no Fuin Shiki 8 trigrams sealing style, the very same seal used to seal Akane inside of him. Currently, Naruto was poring over the notes on how the Kuchiyos, Edo Tensei worked. Releasing a tired sigh, Naruto rubbed his sore eyes. They felt strained from staring at the scroll for so long. If he were to look in a mirror, he was positive he'd see bloodshot eyes staring back at him. As he tried to get rid of the soreness in his eyes, a mug filled with steaming coffee was set on the table he was using. Naruto glanced at the mug, and then at Akane as she slid onto the bench beside him, a cup of coffee in her hands as well. "I figured you could use a pick-me-up," Akane said. "You might have the insane stamina of someone who absorbed nearly all of my chakra, but you are still fundamentally human and get tired." "Thank you." Naruto raised the mug to his lips and took a sip. It was bitter, but he tried to ignore that. He really did need the caffeine. "Have you figured out any countermeasures for the jutsu yet?" asked Akane. Naruto shook his head. "Not yet. I'm currently poring over the information so I can figure out how it works." Akane held her mug in both hands as though using the heat it emitted to keep herself warm. She took a slow sip, set the mug on the table, but still kept her hands on it. "And what have you discovered so far?" "Just the basics." Naruto turned back to the scroll of seals. To perform this technique, the user must first acquire the DNA of the person they want to reincarnate. Once they have the DNA, they smear it on a special scroll, which is activated and the remains spread out in the form of a seal with a living sacrifice in the center. According to the scroll, the sacrifice's chakra signature is completely overridden with the chakra of the one being reincarnated. The technique is said to have two flaws. The reincarnated souls are nowhere near as powerful as they were while alive, and only so many reincarnated people can be controlled at any time. Naruto paused after saying all this and leaned back a bit. "Of course, given that this technique is being used by Orochimaru, I suspect he's made improvements to it, so some of this information might be outdated." Summoning the dead. Akane sighed and shook her head. "You humans always love desecrating the natural laws of this world. I never did understand it." "Me neither." Naruto gave her a helpless smile before he continued explaining the jutsu. "It says here that in order to control the actions of the one summoned, the user must implant a special talisman within the reincarnation's brain. The talisman's design determines how strong the control is. At its most basic level, the reincarnated souls retain their personality, giving them the freedom to approach a given task however they like so long as it broadly carries out the summoner's bidding. At its strongest, the reincarnated soul's personality is eliminated." Naruto stopped speaking for a bit to take a few sips of the coffee Akane had given him. It was still warm, but the longer he let it sit there, the colder it would become. He had no desire to drink cold coffee. "From what I've gathered, there are only 3 known methods to end the technique. The first is to remove the soul from the reincarnated body, the second is to have the summoner end the technique, and the third is to have the reincarnated soul be affected in some emotional way that gives them closure." Akane didn't speak for a moment. When Naruto looked at her face, he saw that she had narrowed her eyes as she stared at the scroll. Her brow was wrinkled slightly. This let him know that she was probably thinking about what he'd said. "The first one sounds like the easiest method of stopping the jutsu," she said at last. "Anyone who casts this jutsu isn't going to cancel the technique, which means you'd have to use a genjutsu to trick them into canceling it. Likewise, giving emotional closure to one who is already dead is oftentimes impossible." Naruto nodded. "I've determined that there are other ways to defeat the jutsu. One method is neutralizing the talisman controlling the reincarnated person with a counter seal. The problem with this is I won't know what seal is being used to control the person who was reincarnated, so I can't actually create a counter seal. Another method is to bind their bodies with a binding seal. This method might actually be the easiest, but it also won't release the jutsu." Akane thought about his words for a little while. "I think you should go with the binding seal. Even if you can't release the jutsu right away, so long as they can't fight anymore, we can find a way to release them later." "I suppose." Naruto nodded. Anyway, Akane stood up, grabbed Naruto's hands, and pulled him to his feet. "It's been several hours since you started reading that scroll. I think it's about time you got some rest." You can continue creating a counter seal tomorrow. Right. Knowing that Akane would probably fight with him on this if he refused, Naruto packed up the scroll of seals and grabbed it before she dragged him off. XOX. The next few days were filled with war meetings as Konoha rushed to gather their forces and prepare for combat. Naruto, whose only job this time was to create a means of countering the four Hokages and Tsukumo Hatake, played no real role in this meetings. However, as one of the strongest ninja in the village, he still had to be there. He generally sat in the back and listened. I've received a message from Gaara, Temari said to the gathered group. He is currently in the process of gathering his forces. He said he'll be able to send an army of 5,000 ninja to supplement our forces. The meetings were still taking place in the operations center, but the table had been removed to make way for several chairs. Given how long these meetings lasted, Kakashi had decided it was better if everyone was sitting. The map had been pinned to the wall where everyone could see it. If we combine Suna's forces with ours, we have 10,000 ninja in total. Shikaku shook his head. That isn't a lot compared to the 50,000 of our enemy. I am aware of that, but it's all he can send. Temari shrugged. Our forces only total about 6,000 to begin with, not including genin. However, we can't send genin, and we need at least enough ninja to protect our village in the event of a sneak attack. True. Kakashi agreed with Temari's reasoning before turning to Darui. Has there been any word from Kumo? Darui scratched his head with an expression that was distinctly uncomfortable. The Raikage sends his apologies, but he won't be able to send reinforcements right away. It seems a second army of those white men have touched down in Kaminari no Kuni. They number about 20,000. The Raikage has gathered an army to confront them. This grim news caused those present within the meeting to look bleak. Naruto, who sat behind everyone as he watched the proceedings, crossed his arms and frowned. I'm guessing Orochimaru sent this army to keep Kumo from interfering, or maybe even to destroy Kumo outright. Shikaku rubbed his chin in thought. Are there any resurrected ninja leading the army in Kaminari no Kuni? I'm not sure. Darui shrugged. The Raikage didn't give me that many details, so I only know the estimated size of the army. That wasn't good news, but it wasn't like there was anything they could do about it now. They would just have to let Kumo handle that army. Since there wasn't much they could do on this front, the group switched from discussing Kumo's involvement in the matter to the army currently marching through Konoha. We've had several Anbu tracking the army for the last few days, Shikaku began. They've had to keep their distance due to the presence of the 5 ninja leading them. However, we have determined that their speed isn't much faster than when they were moving through Tetsu no Kuni. Our initial estimation that it would take them 2 weeks to reach Konoha was off by a week. It will probably take them 3 weeks. So our time to prepare was extended by a bit. Kakashi tilted his head. However, this could also be a trap to make us believe we have more time than we really do. Let's get our preparations done within the next 2 days and march out to meet them. Temari, how long will it take Gaara to bring his forces over? Temari needed a moment to respond. Given the size of the forces he is bringing and how they have to cross the desert, I'd say it will take a week to reach Konoha. We want to be out of here before then. Kakashi grew silent, then nodded. If you can, tell Gaara to meet at our battle encampment. We're going to create a line of defense near the Nikibatsu temple. I'll certainly let Gaara know to meet us there, Temari said. The conversation continued. Kakashi's idea was that Konoha would entrench themselves near the Nikibatsu temple and engage the enemy in a defensive war. Their goal was not to win but to stall for time. Meanwhile, he wanted to have Gaara's forces curve around the enemy forces and attack from the rear. During the time where we're fighting defensively, Naruto, I want you and Akane to engage the 5 reincarnated shinobi and defeat them, Kakashi instructed. Have you come up with a method to counter to the Edo Tensei? I have, Naruto said. I've created several methods to defeat the Jutsu, though some are more effective than others. That said, I believe Akane and I can defeat them. Good. Kakashi nodded. After Naruto expressed his confidence in being able to beat the Edo Tensei, Shikaku decided it was time to bring up another issue. Even if we defeat this army, that still leaves us with Orochimaru. We do not know where he is right now, and until we can take care of him, the problem he represents will continue to persist. I know, Kakashi said. That's why I plan on having Anko take charge of a team of Anbu to locate Orochimaru. We don't know exactly where he is right now, but we do know that he is likely somewhere in Tetsu no Kuni since that is where the army came from. I plan on using Anko's Ten no Juin to have her locate him. Matters were quickly coming to a head. It was decided by Kakashi that after Naruto and Akane defeated the 5 reincarnated ninja, their goal was to meet with Anko, who would hopefully have Orochimaru's location determined. They would be in charge of defeating him. Just leave it to us, Naruto said as the meeting came to a close. XOX. Kakashi was sitting in the Hokage's office after the meeting had ended when Shikaku entered through the door. The man stopped in front of him. While he maintained a respectful disposition, Kakashi could already sense some displeasure in the man. "What is wrong?" asked Kakashi. "Are you really sure it's a good idea to have Naruto face Orochimaru?" asked Shikaku. "I don't want to say I have no faith in his talent, but this is Orochimaru we are talking about. That man has the strength of a cage. You aren't the only one who is worried about Naruto." Kakashi sighed, then presented Shikaku with an eye smile. "However, I also have faith in his ability to succeed. He isn't just some random ninja. Besides, he also has Akane with him." "Just who is that girl?" asked Shikaku. Studying Shikaku with his only visible eye, Kakashi decided that he should probably inform the man about Akane so there wouldn't be any surprises. As he told Shikaku about that woman's real identity, the man's eyes widened so much it looked like they would simply roll out of his sockets. By the time he finished, the Nara clan leader looked like he needed to sit down and have a drink. "I see." Shikaku took in a deep breath. "If what you said is true, then maybe they do have a chance." Kakashi gave the man his famous eye smile. "I have faith in Naruto. I'm sure you've noticed it, but Naruto is the kind of person who others can't help but put their faith in. He is his father's son." "That is true," Shikaku admitted. "In that case, I'll leave this matter to them. If you'll excuse me." As Shikaku left the office, Kakashi eyed the pile of paperwork sitting on the desk. With the war approaching, he had even more papers that needed to be signed and sorted. His shoulders slumped. He couldn't wait for Tsunade to wake up so he could foist this job back on her. Being Hokage kind of sucked. Chapter 65. Naruto and Akane vs. the 4 Hokages. The Nikibatsu Temple was located in the north of Hai no Kuni. If one were to be more specific, it was located several dozen kilometers from the Valley of the End, which bordered Ta no Kuni. Located essentially in the center between Ta no Kuni and Tetsu no Kuni, it was the perfect place to wait for the army of white men. Situated high atop a mountain, Nikibatsu Temple held a majestic appearance that seemed both ancient and new. The well-maintained buildings were large, impressive structures that spread out across the grounds. The main gate that allowed one to enter the temple was an impressive object in and of itself. Made from numerous wooden columns, it was 2 stories in height and possessed a slanted roof made of ceramic tiles. Immediately after passing through the gate, anyone entering would see the lecture hall, the main hall, and the pagoda. While the main hall was a place of worship, filled with statues and numerous displays, the lecture hall was where numerous meetings were held. The pagoda, a 3-story structure made of slanted roofs and golden leaf, served as something of a burial ground. Naruto had been told the remains of several priests were stored there. It was kind of creepy. Konoha's army was not allowed inside the temple. The priests had been very strict about this, and Kakashi didn't want to upset them, so the group set up camp several kilometers away from the temple itself. Ultimately, their goal was not to fight at the temple anyway. It made little difference where they were stationed. Naruto had visited the temple with Kakashi when they had first arrived, but outside of the standard greeting and pleasantries, the priests had mostly ignored them. Actually, when Naruto had visited, he got the distinct impression that most of them were glaring at him. It seemed they were a rather insular group and didn't appreciate outsiders. It had taken 1 week to reach Nikibatsu Temple. After reaching their destination, the army set up a small base. They did this by clearing the forest in a 20-kilometer radius, setting up perimeter seals, and then erecting temporary structures to serve as barracks, medical ward, and command center. Overall, there were about 200 tents that ranged in size from simple 4-person tents to 16-person tents. Naruto stood inside of the command center along with Akane, Kakashi, Shikaku, Yugito, Darui, Maeda Gai, Asuma, Kurenai, Sume, and Tamari. They were the leaders who would be in charge of the divisions. The group was standing around a table that had a map of the elemental nations. It wasn't as detailed as the one in the command center back in Konoha, but they couldn't bring that one. Also sitting on the table were several shogi pieces. Shikaku was using them to illustrate the positions of their enemies and their allies. According to a report from our spies, the army has entered Hai no Kuni and is traveling inland toward Konoha. As he spoke, Shikaku moved the shogi piece representing the 50,000-strong army. The army is currently stationed right here. However, they are making quick progress toward our location. The Anbu in charge of watching them have said that this army hasn't eaten or slept since they began marching. I'm not sure what these things are, but thanks to that, they moved a little faster than I anticipated. They had originally anticipated that it would take them 3 weeks to reach Konoha. However, this was under the assumption that the army they were about to face was full of regular soldiers. People needed to eat and sleep in order to remain in peak condition. While shinobi were trained to go for long periods of time without food and rest, that didn't mean they should. An army marches on its stomach, but this army seemed to have been made of creatures who didn't even have stomachs. As it stands, we just barely made it ahead of them. Shikaku glanced at the ninja currently inside of the tent and summed up his thoughts. We'll have about 1 day of rest, maybe 2, and then those white men will be on us. It's a good thing we rushed to get here, Kakashi mused as he scratched his cheek. Giving the map a moment of contemplation, he turned to Tamari. Any word on when Gaara will arrive? It probably won't be for another few days, Tamari answered as if she'd been expecting that. I received a messenger hawk just a few hours ago. It was from Gaara. He said they've entered Hai no Kuni and are making their way here. In which case, we will need to hold out for several days. Kakashi took a deep breath. Have we managed to get a more accurate estimate on how large the enemy force is? The initial estimation was 50,000. However, that was a rough estimation that Naruto had made based on the memories he received from his clones. We've managed to get a more accurate accounting of our force's numbers, Shikaku said. Naruto's initial estimation was a bit off. The army is about 60,000 strong. That doesn't sound good, Asuma mumbled. An army that large is going to be trouble, Maeda admitted. While I am confident in our ninja, even the best ninja will fall when faced with such an overwhelming number of enemies. I'm afraid it gets worse, Shikaku said to the group. How can it get any worse? Asked Kurenai. Shikaku gave her a look that truly defined the word grave. The 4 Hokages and Tsukumo Hatake aren't the only people who Orochimaru reincarnated. Naruto felt a slight shiver run down his spine as he glanced at the others, noticing the worry on their faces. Those white men were one thing. Their strength was negligible at best. However, if they were supplemented by reincarnated ninja, well, that was a problem. Who else have they reincarnated? Asked Kakashi. Everyone present stared at Shikaku, who looked more resigned than Naruto had ever seen him. The Anbu who sent the latest report claims they've reincarnated the former members of Akatsuki. You can't be serious. Tamari exclaimed. I am dead serious. Shikaku's expression really was resigned. Deidara, Hidan, Kakazu, Kisame, Sasori, and even Itachi Uchiha. All of them have been reincarnated. It was like the temperature had dropped by several thousand degrees. Naruto could practically see the icicles hanging in the air. Each one of those is an S-rank missing ninja, Kakashi muttered. They all have a strength that is comparable to a Kage. If we add Yugito, Naruto, Akane, and yourself, then we only have 4 Kage-level ninja who can contend with them. Shikaku's frown grew increasingly large. Unfortunately, Naruto and Akane are going to be battling against the 4 Hokages and Tsukumo Hatake. That means only yourself and Yugito have the strength to deal with them in a one-on-one battle. Everyone else remained silent as Shikaku spoke. He was their strategist. Even Kakashi didn't dare interrupt the man despite having become the Hokage. At any other time, I would have suggested creating several squads specifically to deal with this group. Shikaku sighed. But that won't work either. We're an army of 5,000 strong going up against an army of 60,000. We're already grossly outnumbered, so we can't actually afford to spare any ninja to take them out. Naruto stared at the map as he thought about this problem. It mostly came down to numbers. The simple fact was they didn't have the numbers to divert anyone from their post to take care of the reincarnated Akatsuki members. Perhaps if they did, they would have been able to do something. If he or Akane could spare some manpower, then, I might be able to help out. Naruto raised his head, causing everyone to glance at him. How can you help? Asked Asuma. Shadow clones, Naruto answered with a smile. With my normal chakra, I can summon over 10,000 shadow clones. However, when I use my hybrid mode, I can summon around 50,000. That should give us enough numbers to fight against this army and divert some forces to taking care of the Akatsuki members. While several of the people inside of the tent like Maeda Guy, Asuma, and Darui seemed to like the idea, Shikaku immediately vetoed it. The Kage Bunshin no Jutsu is a technique that splits your chakra in half to create a clone. If you split your chakra that many times, you'd barely have any left to fight with yourself. Naruto was already aware of that, but he had still proposed it regardless. No one else seemed to have any ideas anyway. What else can we do? Asked Naruto. He stared at Shikaku and the others with a hard look. We are outnumbered, outmatched, and currently have very few options available to us. This might be the only way to combat the army. You bring up a good point, but can you state confidently that you can defeat the Hokages after having your chakra exhausted by summoning an army of shadow clones? Asked Shikaku. Maybe. Naruto thrust out his chest. I won't know until I try. A strange tension seemed to fill the air as Naruto and Shikaku stared at each other. There was no hostility in either person's gaze, but it still felt like a battle of wills was happening between them. Naruto understood how reckless his actions sounded, but even so, he believed in his own strength. He had never tested the limits of his chakra capacity after merging with Yami. That said, he knew that his reserves were nothing to scoff at. According to Akane, he had potentially even more chakra than she did because all of her chakra had been transferred to him when his mom removed the seal. He was sure he could do this. However, just before anyone else could speak, another voice spoke from the entrance. Perhaps perhaps we can be of assistance. Everyone looked over to find a beautiful woman with blue hair and amber eyes with lavender eyeshadow standing by the entrance. No one knew how she had snuck into their base. However, when everyone saw the black cloak with red clouds that adorned her body, they immediately drew their weapons. I am not here to fight with any of you, Conan said. If you aren't here to fight, then what are you here for? Asked Darui. In response to his question, Conan pointed at Naruto. Everyone froze when they saw this. Naruto, who had been doing his best to remain calm, frowned at the woman. He sensed no killing intent in her. However, he could not forget that this woman worked for Pain, the man who had taken his sensei's life. Pain, no, Nagato wishes to speak with you, she said. Naruto's right hand twitched several times, but he did his best to keep it still as he stared at the woman. He glanced briefly at everyone else. None of them looked happy with her words. In fact, Kakashi had even stepped forward. What makes you think we'll let him go see Pain? We have no reason to trust you. That is true. Conan nodded in acknowledgement. I understand that you do not trust us, but Nagato no longer has any reason to go after the Biju after what happened. What's more, the reason he cannot go after the Biju is Orochimaru. We both have a common enemy. However, before we decide whether or not to join forces with you, he wishes to speak with Naruto. As she talked, her gaze had not once left his. You both share the same sensei. That being the case, he believes you both share the same dream. That is why he would like to speak with you. Naruto took several deep breaths as his emotions surged, as hatred warred with common sense and logic. Should he refuse to meet with Nagato out of hand? He wanted to. He wanted to so badly he could almost taste it. However, Nagato is powerful. He remembered the strength Nagato had displayed during their battle in Omegakure. That kind of strength could not be so easily dismissed. I'll go with you, Naruto said, much to the satisfaction of everyone present. Before they could express this, he pointed at Akane. So long as she is allowed to come with me as well. Conan glanced at Akane, nodded, and then turned to him. That will not be a problem. Then lead the way, Naruto said with a gesture of his hand. XOX. Conan led Naruto and Akane to a cave not far from where their base was located, making Naruto wonder if maybe these two had been following him this whole time. The cave wasn't much. It was literally just a small cave buried in the face of a tiny mountain. When he and Akane stepped into the dark interior, it was to see a man trapped inside of a strange contraption. The device containing the man was unusual. It looked like a capsule with legs. The bulbous capsule that contained the man known as Nagato reminded Naruto of an eggplant that had the top half cut off. Meanwhile, Nagato was sticking out of it, his arms jammed into a pair of cylindrical devices attached to a T-shaped protrusion from the back via several cables. If the device was unusual, then the man it contained was just as odd. His red hair had bangs that covered one half of his face. His pale skin looked emaciated, with his rib cage completely visible beneath the skin. Several stakes were sticking out of his back. However, the most odd thing about him were the ripple-like eyes of his Jujutsu. Naruto remembered Jiraiya calling them the Rinnegan. "I see you've come," Nagato said, and though he looked like a cripple, his voice was deeper than Naruto expected. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he steadied himself. He couldn't stop the killing intent that leaked out of him. This man had killed Jiraiya. "You are angry at me." It was not a question. Anyone could tell what Naruto was feeling just by looking at him. "Do you hate me for killing Jiraiya-sensei?" "Of course I hate you," Naruto spat. Nagato nodded. "That is natural. When my friend Yahiko was killed by Danzo and Hanzo, I felt the same hatred you probably do now. Like me, you understand the pain of loss." Nagato stopped talking for a moment as he observed Naruto. He glanced briefly at Akane as well, but most of his attention was on the young man. "Do you want to kill me?" Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Naruto sorted out his feelings quickly. "Of course I want to kill you. You killed my sensei, brutally murdered numerous Jinchuriki by stealing their biju, and have a hand in the terrible situation we're currently facing. I want to kill you so badly that I'm barely able to restrain myself right now." Naruto raised his clenched fist, which shook as though he was resisting the urge to punch the man in front of him. Then he sighed and let the fist fall to his side. "But killing you would accomplish nothing. It won't stop that army, and it won't defeat Orochimaru." Nagato seemed somewhat surprised by the pragmatism Naruto displayed, even if everything he said was true. Most people did not have the ability or foresight to keep themselves from taking revenge when the opportunity presented itself. Yet here they were. Nagato seemed practically defenseless, confined to a strange contraption like a cripple, a perfect target, but Naruto wasn't attacking him. "Besides," Naruto continued, "killing you isn't what Jiraiya would want, and it won't bring him back either. Jiraiya believed in peace. He believed in creating a world where people could understand each other. You and I have both experienced the pain of losing someone we care dearly about," Nagato said. "Does that not mean we understand each other? Don't try to twist my words to make it seem like we can somehow relate after everything that's happened." Naruto snapped as his glare intensified. "The sort of understanding you're perpetuating only brings about more sorrow. It won't bring peace. How can we ever have peace if people are so busy hating each other they won't give another person the time of day? Then you do not think that letting everyone experience pain will bring about true peace? Of course it won't." Naruto was breathing heavily by this point. His rasping pants filled the room, his chest and shoulders heaved from the force of his anger, and his mind had become a boiling pot. He couldn't believe this idiot. Who the hell had such delusional thoughts? Was this man really Jiraiya's first apprentice? What a piece of work. Then tell me something. Nagato gazed at him with those deep eyes. The ripple pattern in them disturbed him. "What do you believe should be done to attain peace? What do you think we should do to avoid war?" Calming down by taking several deep breaths, Naruto thought about the questions he was being posed. How to attain peace? How to avoid war? They were more or less the same question, but peace and war weren't always on opposite sides. "Attaining peace can only be done through understanding and compassion," Naruto said at last. "You have to understand the other person. Furthermore, you have to make an effort and reach out to that person. For a nation, that means reaching out toward other nations and joining hands." Naruto thought his words were logical and well thought out, but Nagato snorted. "You can afford to have these lofty ideals because you live in a relatively peaceful village, but what you fail to realize is that your village, Konoha, has been a part of this problem for centuries. You of the 5 great nations constantly wage war against one another, and the smaller villages like my own are often trampled on as a result." Nagato closed his eyes. Beside him, Konan bowed her head. Naruto was so startled by the suddenly solemn air permeating them that he couldn't think of anything to say. While he remained silent, Nagato began telling his story. I came from a small village inside of Aim no Kuni. It was a simple existence. I lived with my family, and even though we were very poor, I was happy. Nagato sighed as though tired. But that happiness could never last. The Second Shinobi World War happened, and my parents were killed by Konoha ninja in the ensuing conflict. Naruto sucked in a deep breath. He didn't want to say he felt bad for Nagato. He didn't want to admit it. However, he also couldn't lie to himself. Even so, he wouldn't show pity to someone like this. Not to this man. Your village is one of the many villages that have trampled upon the weak, killing and murdering without discretion. Nagato's glare suddenly hardened. What gives you the right to talk about peace? How is what I did any different from what your village did to me? You speak of understanding and compassion, but the world isn't so kind, and people are not willing to understand others. Only when all the people in this world have felt the pain and fear of losing someone will they come to desire peace. Naruto took several steps back from the force of Nagato's shouting. The man who'd been taught by Jiraiya appeared frightening despite looking so frail. No, perhaps it was because he looked so frail that his anger was frightening. His emaciated visage was like something from a horror story told by children back in the ninja academy. The anger radiating from him in waves only served to further enhance his grotesque figure. A heavy silence fell upon the cave. No one spoke up for a long time. Naruto could not think of anything to say, and Nagato appeared to be waiting for his response. Within this tense stalemate, someone snorted. The amount of emotion you humans display never ceases to amaze me, Akane said, stepping forward. Nagato narrowed his eyes. Who are you? In response to his question, the smiling Akane let go of the transformation she was using. A pair of blood-red ears popped on her head and 9 bushy tails sprouted behind her back. Her transformation resulted in the eyes of both Nagato and Konan widening, but that only caused her to relish in their flabbergasted expressions. Grinning, she spread her arms wide. My name is Akane. However, the name most humans refer to me by is Kyuubi. Kyuubi, Nagato murmured, his eyes darting from Akane to Naruto and back again. I see. You were somehow unsealed in this form. Why do you look human? Akane rolled her eyes. Obviously because it is convenient. Do you know how difficult it is to travel when you're a giant 9-tailed fox? People everywhere attack you. It's all terribly annoying, so I use this form when traveling. She paused and cocked her head. Well, that was the original reason. Ever since I was unsealed, I've used this form because I have decided to remain with Naruto. I see. For the first time since this meeting began, Nagato seemed truly confused. His eyes were wide and his mouth hung open. It was like his brain was having trouble comprehending the woman's words, simple though they were. Akane, Naruto murmured. Humans are an altogether unpleasant group, Akane said. You are constantly fighting, arguing, stealing, murdering, and taking from each other. I have lived for over 1,000 years, and in that time, I have never seen this, true peace, that you keep speaking about. The simple fact of the matter is that true peace is a lie. So long as there is someone who wants what other people have, there can never be true peace. Akane's smile was sardonic and filled with derision. The only peace humanity will ever possess is the peace of the grave. When all humanity has been extinguished, perhaps then the world will know peace. Naruto closed his eyes as he listened to the woman's words, which were a reflection of everything she'd been through. He knew she still thought this way. He also never blamed her for it. With his 17 years of life, Naruto did not have the worldly experience that this ancient being possessed. She knew of things he did not simply from having lived for so long and seen so much. Nagato was likewise silent. Whether this was because Akane's words shocked him or some other reason, Naruto could not say. That said, Akane let out a deep, slow breath. For as despicable as humans are, they are also infinitely interesting. I never cease to be surprised by their actions, and occasionally, there will come along one human whose thoughts differ from the rest. These people go on to do great things. Sometimes these great people bring about a peace that lasts for a time. Sometimes they bring a great war that destroys huge swaths of land and takes the lives of numerous people, but all these people had one thing in common. And what is that? Asked Nagato, who had finally regained his voice. The effects of their desires and actions are always temporary, Akane declared. No matter the atrocity, no matter the achievement, everything will eventually get swept away by the sands of time. There was a moment of absolute silence, so deep and encompassing that Naruto dared not break it for fear of what would happen. However, Nagato took a deep breath. You are saying that even if I achieved my goal, it would only be temporary? He asked. But of course. Akane smiled, and it was so bright and cheery that Naruto couldn't help but think she was mocking Nagato. Let us say you accomplished your goal. The world experiences a pain so great they decided to sue for peace because they never wanted to experience that again. Perhaps for a time those people will indeed sue for peace. However, the people who eventually experienced that pain will pass away. The people they leave behind will be those who did not experience the pain you brought about, and among those people, there will eventually come a person whose ambitions are to dominate others. This person will gather like-minded individuals and begin his or her conquest, and then the cycle of war and peace will begin again. It has always been this way. In the face of such a bold claim, no one could say anything to dispute her words. Naruto had already accepted that what she said was a fact. He knew, even if he didn't want to admit it, that true peace might very well be a lie. Perhaps it really didn't exist. Nagato seemed to be struggling. A single glance at his face, which was twisted into something truly unpleasant, confirmed this. Akane glanced at Naruto. Her eyes seemed to say it was his turn to speak. Realizing what she wanted, he stepped forward. Her words might be correct, he said at last. Perhaps true peace cannot be attained. Nagato frowned at him. But I also believe it is possible for us to avoid senseless war and bloodshed. And how do we do that? Asked Nagato. Naruto closed his eyes. By creating an order whose job is to uphold the peace. Opening them again, he stared at Nagato. I will create a group who will work in secret to monitor the elemental nations and dispose of cancerous elements whose ambitions would bring harm to others. If we put out the sparks before they become a fire, we can achieve something close to peace. Nagato remained silent for a long moment, and then spoke slowly. According to the Kyuubi, such a group would only work for a time. There will eventually be someone who will destroy all that you have worked for and war will begin anew. Nodding, Naruto smiled. Yes, but even if I can only achieve a temporary peace, I'll be satisfied so long as the people can live with smiles for a time. Taking a deep breath through his nose, Nagato grew pensive as he stared at Naruto, who did not dare break eye contact. There was no way to know what was going through that man's head. However, Naruto knew this moment would be the deciding factor in their conversation. I think I understand you very well, and you may have a point. True peace might indeed be impossible. The strength in Nagato's shoulders seemed to leave him. Very well. You have convinced me. I will help you in this fight by taking on the ninja who have been reincarnated. I wish to see what sort of peace your way of doing things will bring about. With those words, an accord was struck. Naruto gained an ally, and though it was not someone he wanted help from, he knew better than to not accept the help. After all, given what they were up against, he and the others would need all the help they could get. XOX. Hi-no Kuni was a nation made mostly of forest, but that didn't mean the entire nation was all forest, and within the thick foliage were numerous large clearings. It was one of those large clearings where the Konoha army had gathered. They stood within the foliage just before the clearing, on top of branches, behind trees, and under bushes. All of them were waiting on bated breath for the moment they would engage their enemy in combat. Sweat slowly dropped from their brows, leaving glistening trails. A few swallowed heavily as though trying to keep from being consumed by the tension. Mixed in with the standard blue and green of Konoha ninja was the black and white of Kumo ninja. The clearing that spread out before them was large, a flat piece of land that easily spanned 15 square kilometers. At the moment, there was nothing present, but all of the reports they had received indicated that the army of white men was traveling toward this clearing. Standing among these shinobi were several notable figures. The first among these figures was Naruto, whose spiky blonde hair and blue eyes made him easily recognizable. Akane, the red-headed beauty, stood next to him. Temari, Yugito, and Tenten were also nearby, prepared to lend a hand at any given time, though their job was different from Naruto's and Akane's. Of course, there was also Pain and Konan, a pair who received many incredulous glances, though whether that was because of Pain's emaciated figure or the Akatsuki cloaks they wore was anyone's guess. They stood out the most. Pain was leaning on Conan's shoulder as the woman supported him. It was enough to make people wonder what business this cripple had on the battlefield. Kakashi stood at the very head of this army. His single eye was narrowed as he stared at the clearing, watching it for some sign of movement. Alongside him were the captains who would be leading the charge once the battle took place. The only one not present was Sum, who had a different task from the rest of them. I sense a large amount of chakra signatures coming, Nagato suddenly said as he raised his head. Grimacing as the man spoke, Kakashi said, then I guess it's about time we all got ready. Lifting his headband, the man revealed his Sharingan eye and raised his hand. The world around them became quiet. All of the nervous movements from the ninja who were preparing to battle slowly settled down, until not even a rustle could be heard. These weren't some green-as-grass genin. Everyone there was at least a chunin, and they all had experience with combat, if not war. At that moment, something emerged from the trees on the other side of the clearing. It was a single man. He had spiky blonde hair, blue eyes, and looked a lot like Naruto would if he was a few years older. This man stared at the other side of the clearing with a stern frown that didn't suit his face. Minato-sensei, Kakashi sucked in a breath. After a moment, another man appeared. It was the white-haired Nadaime Hokage. He was quickly followed by the Shodaime and Sandaime Hokages. The last person to emerge was none other than Tsukumo Hatake. The four Hokages and Tsukumo stared into the forest at the other end of the clearing, where Konoha's army lay in wait. It was obvious to anyone they had been spotted. However, the five reincarnated ninja did not do anything right away. Following their appearance, even more figures emerged. It was the white men who reminded Naruto of Zetsu if Zetsu had been split in half. They came out of the forest in droves, thousands of them, so many that it was nearly impossible to count them all. Among the white men army were several more reincarnated ninja. They wore black cloaks with red clouds. There was a man with blonde hair covering one of his eyes, a man with slicked back white hair, a man with a hunched back, a man whose skin looked rough and had eyes with no whites, a black-haired man with Sharingan eyes, and a man who looked like a walking shark. I guess we're up, Naruto said as he looked at Akane. I suppose so. Akane sighed as though this whole situation was more trouble than it was worth. I'm not really a fan of fighting, but I guess there's no helping it. We will deal with the reincarnated Akatsuki members, Nagato announced. Naruto wanted to ask what he could do in his condition, but he didn't. If this man said they would deal with the former Akatsuki members, then it meant he had confidence in his ability to do so. The man had the Rinnegan. He probably had some tricks up his sleeves. We'll leave them to you, Kakashi agreed. Naruto. Right. After taking a deep breath, Naruto undid the lock that kept his powers in check. The people standing near him backed off when chakra exploded from his body. It was not the blue chakra that a human possessed, nor the red chakra of a Biju. It was a dark purple, a mix between the two colors. The ground beneath his feet cracked. Fault lines spread out and widened. However, Naruto ignored that as his body transformed. His hair grew longer and went from blonde to a deep red, the whisker marks on his face turned jagged like thick scars, his eyes went from blue to purple and the rounded pupils became slits, and finally, his nails turned into sharp claws. Unknown to Naruto, 9 objects resting on the inside of his shirt began to glow the moment he unleashed his hybrid mode. Everyone who saw the transformation looked at him in shock, but that shock was nothing compared to how they acted when Akane suddenly revealed her true form. There was no exploding chakra like what happened with Naruto. A pair of fox ears simply appeared on her head. Then 9 bushy red fox tails unfurled from her back. Numerous eyes widened when they saw those, but no one dared say anything. Now wasn't the time anyway. As the chakra from Naruto surged like the rising tide, the army led by the 4 previous Hokages and Tsukumo moved. They ran across the field as though rushing to their deaths. However, given who these people were, it was clear that the euphemism didn't truly work. Let's go, Akane. I'm right behind you. Before the eyes of everyone, Naruto and Akane vanished. There was no forewarning. They were just gone. Not even a split second after they disappeared, a massive explosion of energy and sound slammed into them. Everyone held their hands to their ears as the wind howled and the world shook. Kakashi, who also had a hand to his ears, watched with his Sharingan eye as Naruto and Akane attacked 5 of the most powerful ninja to have graced the elemental nations. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Naruto and Akane had appeared in front of the group with a speed that seemed unreal. Even his Sharingan had trouble keeping up with it. A small orb of spinning chakra took shape in Naruto's hand. Then Akane added her own chakra into the mix, turning the spinning purple sphere into a gigantic red ball that was easily 2 times the size of a human. Naruto slammed the sphere into the ground in front of the Hokages and Tsukumo, which detonated with a power that was unlike anything he'd ever witnessed before. Of course, the people those two were fighting were not some wet-behind-the-ears ninja. They reacted with instincts and reflexes honed from years of combat training and warfare. The Shodaime, Sandaime, and Nidaime Hokages and Tsukumo leapt backward to avoid the massive explosion. Meanwhile, Minato used the space-time ninjutsu he was known for, the Hiraishin, to teleport himself away. Seconds after the attack exploded against the ground, the fierce winds from the jutsu slammed into them. Kakashi and the others had to keep themselves grounded with chakra. While many of the ninja hunkered down to avoid being blown off their feet, he stared into the attack and watched as plumes of energy rose all around the clearing. That attack might not have hit the Hokages and Tsukumo, but many of the white men were blasted off their feet and some were even caught up in the explosion. The attack eventually ended. When it did, the ninja present were able to see the damage that Naruto and Akane's collaboration Rasengan had caused. Holy shit, Temari mumbled. Kakashi couldn't disagree. Spreading out before them was a massive crater that had to be at least 50 meters wide. Kakashi couldn't guess how deep it was. However, the size of the crater was impressive on its own. That said, he knew that now wasn't the time to be impressed. Raising his hand, he signaled to everyone that it was time to fight. Charge, everyone! A fierce battle cry went up as Konoha, Kumo, and Suna ninja rushed out of the clearing to meet the army of white men. The attack from Naruto and Akane had done a good job of scattering the enemy forces. They were spread out now, which meant it would be easier to pick them off. Kunai sailed through the air. Some had exploding tags attached to them, which detonated when they struck the ground, taking out numerous white men with them. Several meters to Kakashi's left, Tenten took out 2 scrolls, opened them, and launched thousands of weapons from within. They struck more enemies, downing them with an almost insane degree of accuracy. It wasn't just projectiles that soared through the air. Several ninja had created a number of hand seals and shouted out the name of their respective jutsu. Fuden, Repusho Wind Release, Gale Palm. Kaden, Gokyaku no Jutsu. Several Suna ninja clasped their hands together, compressing the wind between their palms and transforming it into a powerful gale. As they launched the gale technique at the enemy forces, a number of Konoha shinobi inhaled deep breaths of air, and then spewed massive fireballs from their lungs. The fireballs converged, becoming bigger, and then they struck the gale technique. It was like a firestorm. The moment the combination fireball technique struck the wind, the fire expanded rapidly into a tempestuous storm that seared the very ground. A large number of white men were unable to do anything as the massive sheet of fire, which was reminiscent of a tidal wave, washed over them. Their bodies combusted as they were reduced to ash. They didn't even get a chance to scream. Not wanting to be left out, Kakashi ran through a series of hand seals as he raced toward the white men. A spark appeared on his hand. It was followed by an intense crackling noise. The crackling turned into chirping. It was like 1,000 birds had all began chirping at once. Reikiri, Lightning Blade. Lightning appeared on Kakashi's hand. While it looked like nothing more than a mass of electricity at first, it quickly compressed around his hand, transforming into a sharp blade. Channeling chakra into his feet, Kakashi suddenly disappeared as though he had used the Shunshin no Jutsu to randomly appear in front of a white man. He sliced through the enemy's body without mercy. As the lower and upper halves flew in separate directions, Kakashi disappeared again, only to reappear and slice his hand downward. The enemy was split open from the top of his head down to his groin. Using his speed and the predicting ability of the Sharingan, Kakashi sped through the white men and cut them down. Dozens of enemies fell by his hands. Some of the white men tried to latch onto him, ganging up on him and pouncing, but Kakashi made judicious use of the Kawarimi no Jutsu, substitution jutsu, to replace himself with a log. Those same white men who tried to attack him were mercilessly cut down. Legs, arms, and heads flew through the air and bodies hit the ground. As Kakashi fought his own battles, all around him, others battled as well. including Konan and Pain. XOX. Katsu. High in the air, Deidara made a hand seal and the numerous clay objects surrounded Nagato and Konan exploded. The heat from the explosions was enough that the paper wings Konan was using to fly were singed. Even Nagato broke out in a sweat. Nagato raised his hands as he activated the abilities of the Preta Path. A barrier formed around his and Konan's bodies, not only protecting them from the explosions, but absorbing the chakra that had been used to fuel the explosions in the first place. The flames surrounding them slowly dissipated as all the chakra was absorbed. With something akin to a pitiful cry, they disappeared. It seems I might be able to revitalize myself if I can absorb more chakra, Nagato murmured. He felt stronger than before. He wondered if this was the result of these things being reincarnated. Perhaps their near-infinite well of chakra revitalize him. Konan, try to get us closer to Deidara. Yes. Konan flapped her wings and ascended into the sky. However, before she could get too far, a surging tide of chakra alerted them both to danger from down below. They glanced down to see Kakuzu release a small fireball. While it didn't look like much, one of the masks he used released a powerful tornado-like mass that amplified the fireball's power. It soared up to them, and Nagato was forced to once more absorb the chakra using the powers of the Preta Path. While he did that, Deidara quickly molded more clay in his hands and threw what appeared to be tiny spiders at the two of them. Nagato couldn't count all of them, but he judged there to be at least several dozen. The man formed a hand seal as the spiders fell. Katsu. Another explosion went off, but Nagato absorbed the chakra again. He was beginning to feel a bit better. If he could just absorb all the chakra from one of these reincarnated ninja, then Amaterasu. Black flames suddenly swarmed all around them as Itachi appeared in the air. Nagato grimaced as he kept his energy barrier up to absorb the chakra of those flames, but even though he was able to do so, the heat from the black fire made even him feel pressured. While he was stuck absorbing the chakra, unable to move, another figure appeared over their heads. The blue-skinned Kisame grinned with his shark-like teeth as he descended and brought Samahata down on their heads. Konan. Shikigami no Mai dance of the formula paper. Konan quickly converted her chakra into paper, allowing her body and clothing to transform into numerous sheets of paper that split apart. With no one left to hold him, Nagato fell, which allowed Samahata to miss them both. The paper sheets then wrapped around Kisame, completely covering his entire body before exploding. Nagato was pushed down by the massive blast of fire and chakra. Before he could hit the ground, Konan appeared behind him, transforming back into her original body before catching him. The two of them descended toward the ground. However, the moment their feet touched down, Hidan attacked with his scythe. Bind him. I'm on it. At his order, Konan converted herself into paper once more. Hidan, who had raised his scythe to swing it down at them, suddenly froze as paper wrapped around his body. The paper quickly hardened to keep the man from moving. During this time, Nagato reached out and grabbed the man's face. He once more activated the Preta Path, absorbing the chakra within Hidan and using it to heal himself. Nagato's body slowly changed as he absorbed Hidan's chakra, becoming less emaciated with each passing second. His exposed rib cage soon disappeared underneath a layer of muscle and fat. His scrawny legs that seemed unable to hold his weight gained mass. It was like he'd gone from being a mummy to transforming into a young man. He wasn't able to completely recover. The chakra of a human didn't have that ability. He'd probably need to absorb a Biju's chakra to heal completely, but he looked and felt better now than he had in years. Now that he no longer needed help to stand, Nagato went through several hand seals and slammed his hands into the ground. Kuchio's no Jutsu. Knowing that he needed something hard to kill, Nagato summoned a giant multi-headed dog. The dog quickly attacked Kakuzu, who had been getting ready to launch another jutsu at him, forcing the man to dodge. While he backpedaled, hundreds of threads burst from his body. He wrapped these threads around the dog and squeezed. The dog's body burst apart, but rather than exploding into a gory mess, the dog nearly split into two, and then three. The three dogs then attacked in unison. With Kakazu being kept busy, Nagato activated the Asura Path. 4 additional arms appeared on his body. 2 of them arms transformed into cannons, which he aimed at Hidan. After taking careful aim, he fired a pair of intense chakra blasts from each cannon, and the pale blue chakra shot forward and slammed into Hidan, whose entire upper body exploded into ash. Now that Hidan was at least temporarily out of the way, Nagato turned his attention on Kisame and Itachi, who were trying to box Konan in along with Deidara. He pointed his hands at them both and switched from using the Asura path to the Diva path. However, before he could help her, a long metal tail shot at him from his left. Shinra Tensai. He repelled the tail with his jutsu. Several meters away was Sasori. Nagato pointed a hand at the hunchbacked figure and clenched his fists. A massive explosion went up. However, it wasn't an explosion of fire. Sasori's body just blew apart as if an invisible force had destroyed him from the inside out. A figure jumped out of the puppet, the real body of Sasori, and Nagato sent him flying with another Shinra Tensai. Once that was done, he turned back to help Konan. Bansho Tenin. Manipulating attractive force to pull matter to him, Nagato grabbed Itachi and Kisame with this power and pulled them both toward him. The two were in mid-air as they tried to deal with Konan. With nothing beneath their feet, the two didn't stand a chance and were yanked to the ground. Amaterasu. As expected of a powerful ninja, Itachi did not waste time trying to break free from Nagato's technique. Black fire exploded from Eye. Nagato was forced to activate the Preta path again, using the absorption ability to drain the jutsu of chakra. During that time, Kisame landed on the ground and attacked with Samahata. Nagato quickly transformed from the Preta path to the Asura path. He reached out with 2 of his 6 arms, grabbing Samahata as it descended. A loud screeching sound echoed from where his hands met the sword. Despite the power Kisame had put into his attack, the massive shark-like sword would not budge. As the man struggled, Nagato aimed 2 more of his hands, which had been transformed into cannons, at Kisami's body. 2 massive bursts of chakra emitted from the cannons, blowing 2 holes clean through Kisami's chest. The man staggered back. His grip on Samahata eased up and the pressure on Nagato relaxed, giving him the perfect opportunity to attack again. Shinra Tensai. This time, Nagato manipulated the repulsive force to push matter away. In this case, Nagato slammed this force into Kisame, who was blasted off his feet and sent flying far into the distance. With something of a free moment, Nagato took a quick chance to survey the battlefield. Numerous white men were engaged with the Konoha, Kumo, and Suna ninja. Nagato knew they were the white half of Zetsu. Hidan had already regenerated from Nagato's last attack and Sasori was back. Meanwhile, high above his head, Konan was engaging Deidara in a battle of paper jutsu versus exploding clay bombs. Konan, help me lead them away from the battlefield. Okay. Konan held her hands above her head, gathering a vast quantity of paper sheets into a single chakram-like shape. She didn't waste time in hurling it toward Deidara. The S-ranked missing ninja from Iwa created a large clay bird, which he sent flying at the chakram. Katsu. The bird exploded, taking the chakram with it, but Konan used that moment to fly away and head toward Nagato, who was already running away from the battlefield. The 6 former members of Akatsuki were quick to give chase. I'm guessing you have a plan. Konan asked as she flew alongside Nagato, her wings flapping. Nagato nodded as he raced across the battlefield. There were so many independent battles happening all around them that everything looked like a confusing jumble of individuals' fights merging together. Several meters to his right, a group of ninja were trampled on by over a dozen white Zetsus. On his left, a pair of ninja created a collaboration water and lightning jutsu to fry numerous white Zetsus. The ground was quickly becoming littered with corpses and stained with blood. I noticed it before, but our former comrades did not use some of their more powerful ninjutsu, Nagato explained. That leads me to believe whoever is controlling them put harsh restrictions on their personalities. I guess Orochimaru didn't want to risk them resisting his influence. However, that means they aren't as capable now as they would normally be. Look, even now they are chasing after us instead of attacking the surrounding ninja to thin out the enemy forces. Konan looked behind her to see what Nagato was talking about. Indeed, the 6 ninja weren't even bothering to engage any of the other ninja. All of them were chasing after them instead. So what are you going to do? I need to get far enough away from the main force so I can use my Chibaku Tensai. Even if that doesn't kill them, it will hold them until we can release the reincarnation ninjutsu. Konan nodded. With Nagato's revitalized form, it wouldn't be hard for him to form a Chibaku Tensai with relative ease. The two of them quickly left the clearing and began leaping through the forest. The 5 reincarnated ninja moved swiftly as well, chasing them like a bloodhound. As they darted through the trees, Nagato was forced to absorb more jutsu using the Preta path when Itachi and Kakazu attacked him. I just noticed something, Konan began as she used several paper shuriken to slice a number of clay bombs apart. Why isn't Madara with them? The moment she asked this question, Nagato's body grew tense. His senses warned him of danger. He reacted to this quickly, grabbing Konan and leaping away from the place where they had been soaring. His actions were just in time. Barely a moment after he left that spot, a distortion appeared around the branch he leapt off. The branch vanished. It looks like there is your answer, Nagato said glumly. At that moment, a familiar man in an orange mask descended from a tree and tried to attack them. Konan and Nagato split apart. Madara went over Nagato, performing a series of hand seals and releasing a massive fireball jutsu. Nagato made liberal use of the Shinra Tensei to destroy the fireball and push Madara back. During the time where Nagato was pushing Madara back, the other 5 descended upon him. Kisame sliced at him with Samahata, but he blocked it by once again using the Asura Path's incredible strength. Kakazu tried to use a jutsu. However, the now 6 massive dogs had stuck on his tail and attacked him en masse. Itachi broke into a dozen crows and appeared before him, but Nagato recognized the genjutsu and broke it quickly. He then used Bansho Tenon to pull the man toward him before reverting to the Asura Path and kicking him in the chest. Pushing chakra into the bottom of his feet, he sent Itachi soaring backward. At the same time, he sent a Shinra Tensei toward Sasori, smashing the human puppet into a tree that broke apart on contact. Konan did an admirable job of keeping Deidara busy as they fought a moving battle. It didn't take much longer before they entered another clearing. This one wasn't as big as the one where the other battle was taking place. However, Nagato judged that it was far enough away from the main battle to suit his purpose. Reverting to the Diva path, Nagato began building his chakra as he did everything he could to avoid being killed. Black fire tried to engulf him. Waves of water attempted to crush him. Massive explosions rang through the sky, causing the air to burst. Throughout it all, he and Konan played a defensive battle. They landed on the ground, back to back. Konan went through several hand seals. Thousands of paper sheets split from her body and flew around them, 2 of them, spinning so fast they looked like a miniature tornado. The paper quickly covered them like a dome. Multiple explosions came from outside. Then black fire began eating away at the paper. You had better hurry, Konan grunted. This defensive measure won't last much longer. Nagato didn't say anything as he clapped his hands together. His chakra surged between his palms as he slowly drew his hands back, revealing a small black sphere. He gritted his teeth as he summoned as much chakra into this technique as he dared. 1 sphere turned into 2, which became 3, then 4, 5, 6, and finally, 7. I can't hold on any longer, Konan shouted as the paper dome suddenly evaporated, eaten by the black flames. I'm done. Chibaku Tensei. At that moment, Nagato released all 7 spheres into the air. Nagato had never used the Chibaku Tensei like this. The 7 spheres swiftly flew into the air. Each black sphere acted as its own center of attraction, drawing in everything around it. The air distorted as the sucking force ripped massive chunks of earth from the ground. Nagato grabbed Konan and used the Asura path to propel them both away from the center of his technique. The former members of Akatsuki weren't so lucky. Turning around to watch what was happening, Nagato was able to witness each member of Akatsuki get pulled up by the respective heavenly body that had grabbed them. They did try to escape. However, the attraction force was far too strong. Along with the massive amounts of earth, numerous trees were ripped from their roots. Nagato eyed one large piece of land that was torn from the ground, broke apart, and slammed into the sphere that contained Itachi. Almost a minute after he performed the jutsu, the technique was complete, and 7 spheres several times the size of a person hovered in the air. That should hold them, Nagato muttered with a heavy sigh. Are you okay? Asked Konan. Yes. He smiled. I am just tired. Then let's rest for now, she suggested. Our part in this battle is done anyway. Yes. Lowering himself to the ground, Nagato winced as he bent his stiff legs. It had been so long since he had used them that they felt awkward. Konan also sat down beside him. Together, the two of them looked into the sky at the floating satellites overhead. XOX. Running away was harder than it looked when the people chasing after you were cage-level opponents. Mokuten. Mokuryu no Jutsu, Wood Release, Wood Dragon Jutsu. From their left, a massive dragon made of wood burst out of the trees and charged toward them. Its long, serpentine body had to be at least 20 feet long. Numerous bone-like protrusions grew from its head in a crown and descended down its back. This massive beast, which flew toward them with its jaws wide open as though seeking to devour them, was met by Akane. Ha! It was impressive how Akane turned the moment her feet touched the branch, blasted off like a fire jutsu, and reared her fist back. The air around her fist distorted as she channeled vast amounts of chakra into it. Then she brought it down on the dragon's head. It exploded. Massive red chakra slammed into the beast's head, rippling outward, and then the head and dragon exploded, scattering wood fragments everywhere. Suiten. Sujinheki, Water Release, Water Wall. A loud shout echoed through the air. Naruto had only a moment to leap away before a water exploded from the ground. He flipped through the air, channeled chakra into his fists, and launched them forward. Senpuken. Two fist-shaped bursts of highly compressed air slammed into the water, causing it to detonate. As water exploded everywhere, a kunai appeared in front of him. It was tri-pronged. Naruto barely had time to ponder this kunai before a blonde-haired man appeared next to it. Minato Namikaze was already preparing to attack. A swirling blue ball of energy appeared in the hand that he thrust forward. Naruto met the Rasengan with his own. The two attacks grinded against each other before exploding and sending them both flying away from one another. Naruto landed on the trunk of a tree and glanced at Akane. The redhead was locked in battle against Tsukumo, whose blade moved so fast it only appeared as a white flash of light. Despite its speed, Akane had no trouble keeping up with it. She dodged an upward slash by taking a step to the left, then avoided a horizontal swing by ducking. As she came up, her left hand curled into a claw, which she used to strike Tsukumo with. Red chakra burst out from her clawed hand, striking Tsukumo dead on and tearing his body apart. Of course, this man was not alive. Rather than his body turning into a gory mess, it became ash as it scattered across the ground. Tsukumo was out of commission for now, but it was only temporary. Naruto could already see the man was healing. Ash gathered around his body and congealed to form the parts that had been destroyed. He and Akane joined forces again and continued running. However, before they could get too far, a pair of figures appeared before them. They were Hashirama and Tobirama Senju. The two founders of Konoha went through a series of hand seals. Suiten no Jutsu, Water Release, Water Bullet Jutsu. Naruto could sense the chakra surging through Tobirama before the man spat out a powerful torrent of water. Creating a Rasengan in his hand, Naruto met the force head-on, the spinning sphere of chakra slicing through the water bullet as though it was made of paper. Kuchios. Rashomon. Hashirama slammed his hands onto the ground and summoned a massive gate with a demonic face on the front. It was incredibly large. However, even though it was nearly 10 times bigger than them, neither Naruto or Akane stopped running. Don't think this can stop us. Akane shouted as she channeled chakra into her left hand. The chakra formed a whip, which she used to slice through the Rashomon gate. Naruto almost whistled when he saw the gate's upper half separate from the lower half. He and Akane leapt over the remains of the gate just as Hashirama and Tobirama did the same. The two experienced former Hokages engaged them in a taijutsu battle. Naruto blocked a fist aimed for his head, and then he tried to knee Hashirama in the testicles, but he was blocked by his opponent's knee. On the other side, Tobirama and Akane were a blur of fists and feet. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto created a shadow clone and replaced himself with it. Now behind Hashirama, he slammed a Rasengan into the man's back, sending him hurtling forward. He didn't wait to see the results of his attack. Turning toward where Akane and Tobirama were engaged in combat, Naruto took a deep breath and channeled his chakra. Senpuken. A pair of compressed, fist-shaped wind attacks slammed into Tobirama and sent him hurtling away. The man struck the ground. Rather than roll across the forest floor, however, he twisted himself into a spin and flipped onto his feet. Akane and Naruto stopped paying attention to him. They put on a burst of speed and rushed through the forest. Their goal wasn't to lose these 5, but to lead them somewhere else. You know, I just realized we haven't seen that old monkey anywhere, Akane muttered as they ran. Yeah, I noticed that too. Naruto suddenly felt on edge as he looked around. That man is known as the professor for his knowledge of jutsu. It's been said that he's one of the most skilled shinobi to ever exist. If that is the case, then Doden, Doryu Taiga, Earth Release, Earth Flow River. The ground underneath him and Akane turned into a flowing river of mud that swept the two of them off their feet. Doden, Doryuden, Earth Release, Earth Dragon Bullet. Before they could even thinking of getting out of this situation, a dragon head appeared within the mud and shot several mud balls at them. Kaden, Karyu Enden, Fire Release, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet. Several dragons made of fire covered the mud balls, which burned all the more fiercely. Naruto could feel the heat singing his arms even though it was meters away. As the flaming mud balls came closer, Akane's chakra exploded from her body and created a dome of energy. The flaming mud balls slammed into the dome and dissipated. At that moment, Naruto glanced around and saw Sarutobi standing on a tree branch several meters above them. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto created 2 clones. One created a Rasengan, while the other channeled more chakra into the Rasengan, causing the jutsu to grow in size. The 2 clones launched themselves at Sarutobi. However, Naruto and Akane didn't wait around to see what would happen. Seconds later, my clones were destroyed, Naruto sighed as they continued running through the forest. You knew they would be, Akane muttered. How much further do we have to go? We're almost there, Naruto assured. In fact, we should be reaching the Valley of End any minute now. Just as Naruto said that, the forest around them disappeared as they burst out of it. The land beyond was a massive valley. He and Akane were standing on a precipice overlooking the valley, which allowed them to see everything, including the flowing waterfall with the statues for Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. I heard this was where Sasuke disappeared, Naruto muttered. I have never been here before. Do you think this is a good place to have our battle? Asked Akane. It's as good a place as any. Naruto shrugged. Come on, let's set up shop before those guys arrive. Naruto leapt down from the ledge and Akane followed him. The two landed on the ground, then Naruto created 6 shadow clones. He gave a scroll to 4 of them. All the clones disappeared. They knew their jobs. And now we wait, Naruto said. What do you think our chances of winning are? Asked Akane. What are you saying? Naruto grinned at the lady. Chances of winning. We're going to kick their asses. Akane shook her head as a resigned smile lit her lips. Where does that confidence come from, I wonder? You realize our opponents are 5 Kage level ninja, right? So, Naruto raised an eyebrow. You have 10 times more chakra than all of them. That doesn't mean much. She frowned. That Hashirama has some weird ability that stops me from using my powers. If I get caught by him, it's pretty much over. I'll fight him, Naruto said. If you can take on his brother, Tsukumo, and Sarutobi, I'll deal with the Shodaime Hokage and my old man. Giving me more opponents. I figured the all-powerful Kyuubi would prefer to fight more people. As the two of them bantered, the 5 ninja they had been fighting appeared on the ledge they had jumped off several minutes ago. Naruto was surprised it had taken so long for them to arrive. The two groups stared at each other, one from down low and the others high above. Then the group of 5 descended from the ledge and landed on the ground. These two are quite powerful, Tobirama murmured. Indeed, Hashirama said. I was most surprised that such young individuals could hold all 5 of us off so well. While Hashirama, Tobirama, and Tsukumo didn't have any feelings for him and Akane one way or the other, Sarutobi and Minato looked at Naruto like they had seen a ghost. Considering what they were, Naruto found that slightly ironic. Naruto, is that really you? Asked Sarutobi. In the flesh, old man. Naruto spread his arms and smiled. It's been a while, hasn't it? Sarutobi smiled and slowly shook his head. Although it only feels like seconds have passed for me, I can see that you have already grown up. You've become quite powerful. Obviously. Naruto thrust out his chest and grinned. You are looking at the #1 most powerful ninja of the elemental nations. Of the elemental nations, huh? Said Sarutobi. That is a bold claim. Naruto, Minato mumbled. Yo, Dad. Naruto raised a hand in greeting. Naruto, you've become so big. Despite his face being fairly emotionless, perhaps due to the controls placed on him via the reincarnation jutsu, tears welled up in his eyes. You were just this little thing when I last saw you. Ah, if you're going to tell baby stories, then I'm leaving, Naruto grumbled. While Sarutobi snorted, Minato's lips actually twitched a bit. However, it seemed whatever controls had been placed on these five was strong. His face still didn't display much emotion. That said, he got a better reaction from Minato and Sarutobi than he did Hashirama, Tobirama, and Tsukumo. He didn't know if those three had more control seals on them, or if they just didn't care because they had no idea who he was. Naruto, Sarutobi suddenly asked. Do you mind if I ask who that woman with you is? Woman. Minato suddenly focused on Akane. Now that you mention it, I am also curious. It seems you and she are close. I guess that means you share my taste for redheads. Well, kinda, Naruto skirted around the issue. What do you mean kinda? Asked Minato. Our relationship is complicated, Akane said at last. It is also none of your business. As she spoke, the fox ears on her head suddenly twitched, and the nine tails writhing behind her became a flurry of activity. The 5-cage level ninja quickly spotted these appendages. While they seemed confused at first, enlightenment entered their eyes moments later. I thought I recognized that chakra, Minato muttered in shock. You are, the Kyuubi. That's right, Akane said. Huh, Minato cupped a hand to his chin. I had no idea you were a woman. Neither Akane nor Naruto bothered to explain that she technically wasn't male or female. She could theoretically choose whatever form she wanted. Akane had chosen a female form because her observations had shown her that it was easier to manipulate people if she was a woman. Having decided that the time for conversation was over, Naruto and Akane rushed forward. Minato, the fastest among them, threw his kunai and appeared between the two. It was way too fast. Had they been anyone else, neither of them would have been able to respond. However, they had already known what to expect, so when Minato appeared between them, a Rasengan in each hand, Naruto and Akane slammed their feet into his face. Minato was launched clean backward. He slammed into the cliff wall, which broke upon impact and sent a massive amount of rubble tumbling down. That moment initiated the battle. Chojo Kebutsu top transformed Buddha. After going through a series of hand seals, Hashirama created several gigantic wooden statues, each of which had hundreds and even thousands of hands. Naruto raced toward the Hashirama. The man commanded the hands to descend upon him. There were so many that it should have been impossible for anyone to dodge. Naruto vanished on the spot. The hands slammed down, and then Naruto reappeared on top of the long arms. With a slice of his hands, he created a wind blade that cut straight through the wooden arms. However, more hands were coming. They rose into the sky and flew down swiftly, forcing Naruto to perform his disappearing act several more times. The ground around them shook and broke apart, with massive fault lines spreading out all around Naruto. Each one was large enough that he was afraid of falling in. He did his best to focus on dodging the hands as they came, but there were so many, and the longer he continued to avoid them, the closer they came to hitting him. Hashirama is getting my timing down. He only realized a few seconds too late what the man was trying to do. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, several hands crashed into him. The force of the assault was so powerful that Naruto felt like he was being crushed. Each hand slammed into him like a tsunami crashing into a small village. Gritting his teeth as he endured the pain, Naruto released a massive burst of dark purple chakra. It was nothing more than him exercising his excess power. However, his chakra had a unique corrosive effect on other jutsu. The wooden fists attacking him decayed and burned away as though they'd been ducked in acid. Once he destroyed the hands, Naruto attacked the statues. He created one shadow clone for each statue. The shadow clones created a Rasengan with wind chakra enhancing them, and then they attacked while Naruto went after Hashirama. With a ferocious yell, Naruto engaged Hashirama in a taijutsu battle. He swung at the man with a sloppy corkscrew punch. His opponent, seemingly shocked that he would use such a sloppy technique, easily avoided the attack in a manner that was almost lazy. Naruto used that moment to surprise his opponent by stomping on the ground and releasing a burst of chakra. The ground shook, Hashirama stumbled, and Naruto slammed a Rasengan into his face. It's just as I thought. He isn't as strong as he should be. Orochimaru probably has a tighter leash on the cages and Tsukumo to keep them from resisting. However, that came at the price of making them less powerful. As this thought flashed through his mind, 6 tri-pronged kunai suddenly appeared around him. Naruto sensed the air currents shift and spun around. He raised his arm to block Minato's attack, a powerful punch that jolted his arm. Before he could consider retaliating, his dad disappeared and pain suddenly erupted from his spinal cord. Gnashing his teeth together, Naruto spun around and sent a wind blade at his opponent, but Minato had disappeared by then. It wasn't long after the initial attack that Minato began flashing around Naruto at speeds he just couldn't keep up with. The man was so fast he was like lightning. Cuts and bruises appeared on his body as he tried his best to keep up with the man, but no matter how quickly he responded, Minato was always just a little bit faster, disappearing one moment and attacking from his blind spot the next. All he could do was move to avoid letting his vitals be attacked. Mokuton, Daijirin no Jutsu, would release, Great Forest Technique. While Naruto was busy engaging Minato in a losing battle, Hashirama's arms suddenly transformed into giant trees. The trees rapidly grew, lengthening at a baffling speed as they forked into many branches. Then the branches transformed into sharp stakes. At that moment, Minato leapt back and allowed the stakes to attack Naruto. They pierced his body numerous times. However, just as the attacks stabbed into him, the Naruto in front of them was replaced by a log. Before either of them could begin searching for Naruto, a loud screeching noise echoed from above them. They looked up. Naruto was hovering in mid-air. He had raised his hand eye over his head, where a swirling ball of bright purple chakra spun around in all directions. The Rasengan was much larger than a normal one. Aside from being nearly twice as large, it also had several pointed blades spinning around it, making the jutsu look like a Fuma Shuriken. Futen, Rasenshuriken. With the power granted to him through his hybrid form, Naruto lobbed the attack toward Minato and Hashirama. The pair's eyes widened just as the speeding technique slammed into the ground between them. After striking the ground, the central sphere of the Rasenshuriken detonated with a powerful destructive force. A vortex of wind spread across the area. This purple-white vortex expanded rapidly, growing until it was about 15 meters in diameter. Even though the amount of destruction was contained to just the vortex, the jutsu was so powerful that Naruto was pushed backward and dust flew everywhere. He landed on the cliff wall and stuck there with chakra. As he knelt upon the wall to catch his breath, he glared into the vortex to see if the two had survived. While Naruto was battling against Hashirama and Minato, Akane had taken to engaging the other 3 cage-level ninja. She used no ninjutsu in her attacks. She didn't need to. Her 9 tails grew until they were nearly 10 times their original size and slammed into the ground, creating earthquakes with every attack. Sarutobi, Tsukumo, and Tobirama were constantly being forced to leap around in order to avoid the attacks. Whenever one leapt into the air, Akane would launch a compressed ball of chakra that slammed into their bodies and detonated with a destructive force that didn't lose out to his Rasenshuriken. That woman. It was clear from how well she was doing that Akane really did have more destructive potential than him. Her control over her own chakra was fantastic. He wondered if he'd be able to use his chakra like she did eventually. As he eyed their battle out of the corner of his eyes, Naruto watched as Tobirama and Sarutobi created a water-lightning combination attack. The powerful beam of energy that formed from their 2 jutsu raced toward Akane. However, just when it looked like the beam of destruction would slam into her, a red barrier appeared and took the attack. Despite the attack being blocked, the ground underneath her feet shattered, which caused Akane to lose her footing. At that moment, Tsukumo appeared and thrust out his sword, which Naruto realized was coated in lightning chakra. It looked like his attack would pierce her chest. Yet Akane raised her hand just before it hit. The white blade slammed into her palm but didn't penetrate it. Naruto wondered why at first, but then he saw the red chakra being emitted from her palm and realized it was because she had created a thin layer of chakra to form a protective shield. As Naruto was admiring Akane's supreme chakra control, the vortex of swirling wind energy disappeared. He looked at the giant crater his attack had formed. It was about 15 meters across and probably 5 or 10 deep. Minato and Hashirama weren't there. For just a moment, Naruto wondered if perhaps they had been blown to bits, but then he sensed movement behind him and leapt off the wall. An explosion of chakra pushed Naruto back. He landed on the ground and looked up to see his dad standing where he had been. There was a massive hole in the wall. Naruto recognized the damage, which could have only been caused by a Rasengan. Mokuten, Mokuryu no Jutsu. Naruto wasn't given time to admire his dad's destructive power as another serpentine dragon appeared before him. Hashirama was several meters away. His hands were stuck on one seal. The wood dragon had already blasted from the ground and flew at him with an enraged war cry. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto created a shadow clone, made a Rasengan on his hand, and had the clown feed it chakra. As the Rasengan increased in size, Naruto forced it to grow smaller and smaller, until it was about the size of his thumbnail, and then he aimed it at the dragon. Rasenshoto, spiral shot. Slamming his fist into the tiny Rasengan, Naruto launched the sphere toward the dragon. It struck the dragon's head. There was a moment where the wood dragon seemed to resist the tiny Rasengan. It was only for a moment, though, and then the Rasengan drilled straight through the dragon and burst out the other side. Perhaps due to the destructive energies of the Rasengan, the dragon exploded from the inside out and broke apart. Ha, ha, ha. Naruto took several deep breaths as Minato landed next to Hashirama. Damn, I'm actually beginning to run out of chakra. Naruto had no idea how long this battle had been going on for, but he was actually running low on chakra thanks to how many high-level jutsu he'd been firing. Some of those jutsu were still in the experimental phase too, so they wasted a lot of chakra. Maybe he should have held back. However, given his opponents, Naruto didn't think that would have been a good idea. Someone landed behind him. Naruto didn't turn around to see who it was. A soft back pressed against him, and several furry tails touched his legs. "Are your clones almost finished?" asked Akane. "I don't know," Naruto grumbled. "Don't ask me. Who else would I ask?" "Ah, good point." Naruto sighed as he realized that all 5 cage-level ninja were surrounding them. "I think they should be finished soon." Akane clicked her tongue. "That's a very vague answer." "Well, excuse me for being vague." A lull had entered the battle, which was the only reason the two of them could banter like this. Their 5 opponents seemed wary of their battle prowess. This fight had gone on for quite a while, a number of techniques had been thrown about, and despite being outnumbered, he and Akane still gave as good as they got. "These two are quite tough," Hashirama said. "Yeah," Minato agreed. "That boy is your son, right?" "That's right. You should be proud." "I am very proud." Naruto heard the conversation between Hashirama and Minato, but he didn't have the time to feel pride because his clones finished their task at that moment. Kekkaiman Gofujutsu. Hachiman Heiho, Uzumaki Sutairu Barrier Gate 5 Seals Technique. Castle Closing 8 Gates, Uzumaki Style. The moment those words had been spoken, 4 giant gates emerged from the ground in the north, east, south, and west of the Valley of End. Then a barrier suddenly sprang to life, connected to each of the 4 gates. Naruto, Akane, and their 5 opponents were trapped in the center of this technique. "This technique," Hashirama mumbled. "It's quite the strong barrier technique. It's a modified version of the Kekkaiman Gojutsu," Hachiman Heiho, Naruto said. "I perform the jutsu using my shadow clones, who each have a map of the specified area where the jutsu will be used. It uses up all of their chakra, but in exchange, the jutsu not only lasts for 12 hours, it can't be broken no matter who tries to break through it." An ingenious technique, no doubt. Tobirama nodded. "However, you are now trapped in here with us. In the end, nothing has changed." "Of course it has." Naruto grinned. "I made 6 clones. This technique only requires 4. What do you think the other 2 clones are for?" At that moment, Naruto and Akane were replaced by Naruto's shadow clones. The two appeared outside of the barrier. Naruto wore a broad and satisfied grin. "HMPH. Tobirama snorted. "If you can just escape this by using the replacement technique, then so can I." Tobirama tried to use the replacement technique, only for nothing to happen. He frowned, repeated the hand seals again, and still nothing happened. A moment of silence passed. Finally, he seemed to realize what this meant. "I did say this was a modified technique," Naruto informed him. "I made sure Akane and I had an escape route." "An excellent job, Naruto." Sarutobi nodded in approval. "You've done a great job capturing us. However, now I have to ask what you plan on doing with us." Naruto shrugged. Nothing. I have no way of breaking this technique. Therefore, the only way to release you all is to find Orochimaru and force him to end the jutsu himself. My entire point in coming to the Valley of the End was to trap you guys here so I could help destroy that army you guys came with. After that, we'll have other people maintain this barrier, while we go ahead and find Orochimaru. Minato cupped his chin before nodding several times. You've thought this out well. I'm very impressed. It looks like there is nothing we can do to escape from this. Tsukumo spoke for the first time. I guess that means we failed. Indeed. Hashirama and Tobirama nodded. Anyway, you five can just stay there, Naruto said. Hang out and play shogi or something. Akane and I have to help finish off that army. Naruto didn't give the 5-cage level ninja time respond as he and Akane leapt onto the cliff wall, ran up it, and disappeared. As they vanished from sight, the five looked at each other. What should we do now? Asked Minato. I like that kid's suggestion, Hashirama said. Anyone up for a game of shogi? Chapter 66. The Heat of Battle. Fascinating, Orochimaru murmured as he studied the demonic statue with his Sharingan eyes. It seems this thing can normally only be controlled by someone who has the Rinnegan. Placing his hand on the massive statue, he allowed his chakra to flow through it and smiled. But of course, one doesn't need to control the statue to release the Biju inside of it. The demonic statue was a giant, earthen-colored humanoid with a decayed appearance. It looked like a robe had been draped over its body, and a number of spiky protrusions emerged from its back. 9 ghastly eyes sat on a hideous face. 6 of them were currently with a light blue iris and pupil. Chains wrapped around its wrists and ankles, binding it in some way that seemed symbolic, perhaps. Meanwhile, there was a scroll in its mouth, which it was biting down on. The scroll was being held in place by 2 ropes that extended to either side of its head. Yes, I believe I can use this, Orochimaru said with a nod. Just then, a noise caused his ears to perk up. It was the sound of footsteps. The walk was neither hurried nor slow. Calm and collected, they drew ever closer. Orochimaru turned around in time to see Kabuto walking over with something slung over his shoulders. Ah, my prodigal apprentice returns, and I see you have brought me a gift. As if in response to his words, Kabuto tossed the object he was carrying to the ground, allowing what Orochimaru recognized as a body to hit the floor with a harsh thud. As the body flopped over, Orochimaru gazed down at it. He recognized that face and pineapple-shaped haircut. I see you've brought little Enko here. Orochimaru praised. Kabuto shrugged. She was snooping around. I assume she wanted to locate our hideout. He looked down at the woman and snorted. I thought she might prove useful to you, so I brought her along with me instead of just killing her. I might be able to find some use for her. Currently, he didn't have one, but perhaps he could experiment on her later. How is the battle going? After hesitating for a moment, Kabuto sighed. Not as well as we had assumed, I think. The 4 Hokages and Tsukumo have been neutralized by Naruto and that woman who is with him. It seems they created a unique barrier ninjutsu specifically for the purpose of containing them. Orochimaru stroked his chin. That Naruto is becoming more of a pain with each passing day. What about the members of Akatsuki? There was another pause. They were defeated by pain. Orochimaru actually felt his heart leap a little. By pain, you say? You mean the former leader of Akatsuki? The very same. Kabuto nodded. It seems he decided to join forces with Konoha rather than let us do as we please. He and that blue-haired woman with them fought off the 6 members of Akatsuki and trapped them in floating spheres of earth. A sigh unwillingly escaped Orochimaru's mouth. The powers of the Rinnegan are indeed vast. I had been hoping to get my hands on it, but Pain and Konan disappeared after their fight with Jiraiya in Omegakure. Given the situation, perhaps he should not be so surprised. However, he still found it unexpected that Pain would agree to help Konoha, or that Konoha would actually team up with him. Would wonders never cease? What should we do, Lord Orochimaru? Asked Kabuto. Orochimaru frowned for a moment, then glanced at the demonic statue before slowly shifting his gaze to Anko. Kneeling before the woman, he placed his hand on her neck. He touched the seal there. It was the seal he had placed on her a long time ago. Channeling his chakra, he attached a small thread to the seal, and then pulled. A smile split his face as the chakra in the seal slowly flowed along the thread he had created. The seal disappeared not longer after that. Kabuto, Orochimaru said as he stood up. I would like you to prepare the bodies of the 5 Jinchuriki that are sealed in storage, plus 1 extra. Also, set the experiments loose on the ninja of Konoha. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. Kabuto didn't dare disobey. After giving his master a nod, he turned around and rushed out to prepare the bodies, leaving Orochimaru alone with the unconscious Anko. I suppose it is time I head out to the battlefield as well, Orochimaru mused to himself as he walked back into the laboratory. He wandered over to one section of the wall that was separated from the rest. There were 9 large sliding doors on this side. Unlike the other part of the wall that contained eyes, these doors contained something else. He slid the doors open one by one. Each container that opened had a scroll resting inside. It didn't look like much, but they were quite large, almost the same size as a person. He smiled. But first, I need to prepare some insurance, he said to himself. XOX. Yugito's body was covered in fiery blue chakra as she raced across the battlefield. A number of white Zetsus appeared in her path. One of them tried to attack her using taijutsu, but she ducked underneath the blow, and then came up with a powerful upper claw attack. Her elongated nails tore the white Zetsu's face to shreds. The creature didn't even have time to scream before his body lit up like a bonfire. As the white Zetsu ran around in a panic, his body fat combusting and causing his insides to leak out of his pores, Yugito leapt into the air, twirled around, and struck another white Zetsu with her extended foot. Her kick not only lit her enemy's head on fire, but the attack was so strong it snapped his neck. The man crumpled in a heap. His flaming body twitched several times, then went still. 6 more white Zetsus converged on her location. All of them surrounded her and rushed in as though to body pile her. Yugito hissed as she slammed her hands into a ground and adopted a haunched posture like a feral cat preparing to fight against a dog. As she took this action, the flames around her body grew brighter and more fierce. Chakra circulated through her body, raising her temperature as well before. Like a dam bursting, chakra poured out and caused the flames around her to erupt. All 6 white Zetsus caught fire. Their bodies combusted into flames, turning them into living fireballs. The pain was obviously too much. Agonized screams tore from their throats before the fires soared into their mouths, burning their trachea to the point where they couldn't even talk. Narrowing her eyes, Yugito used her ability to control the flames, spreading the fire throughout their bodies and burning them from the inside out. It wasn't long before nothing but piles of ashes remained. Standing up, Yugito let out a soft sigh. She had no idea how long this battle had been going on for. It felt like days had passed, but it couldn't have been more than a few hours surely. A glance around revealed that everyone else was still fighting. Kakashi was several meters away, lightning chirping in his hand as he cut through white Zetsus like a scythe did to wheat. Temari and Tenten were fighting in conjunction, firing weapons and using wind jutsu to increase their strength. Even Team Samui was utilizing excellent teamwork to fight against the overwhelming number of opponents. And speaking of their opponents, it really did seem like they were endless. Yugito could not help but grimace as she noticed more white Zetsus pouring out of the trees. She must have killed over 1,000 of these bastards, and yet they just kept coming. Not knowing what else to do, Yugito was about to re-initiate her battle with the enemy, when the ground suddenly rumbled. A lull appeared in the battle. A pause. Everyone, including the white Zetsus, looked to where the source of the rumble had come from. Yugito turned her head and gaped when she saw numerous large chunks of land rising from the ground several kilometers away. She'd never seen anything quite like it. The earth was rising from the ground, being crushed into thousands of tiny pieces, and then converging on 7 locations. Several seconds passed before 7 floating spheres soon converged on those 7 locations. "What is that?" asked Yugito quietly. "Hell if I know," a purring voice answered from within her mind. "That said, this chakra feels mighty familiar. I could swear I have felt something like this before. I guess now isn't the time to worry about such things," Yugito murmured as she looked back at the battlefield. She prepared to begin fighting again when another earth-shattering rumble shook the ground. "Oh, for the love of Kami. What is it now?" As if answering her question, 6 large figures suddenly appeared in the distance. One of them was a giant tanuki with a large pot belly and even larger tail, another was a massive turtle with a hard shell and 3 tails. There was also a gigantic ape with bright red fur and 4 tails. Following this pattern, the creature with 5 tails looked like a white horse with a dolphin's head and 2 long, pointed horns in the back and 3 shorter horns on the front. A slug with 6 tails was next, and finally, a beetle that had 6 wings and a tail fluttering behind it flitted around above them. As Yugito saw the 6 creatures before her, she immediately released a hoarse laugh. This was really not good. XOX. Naruto stumbled as he and Akane ran through the forest. The sad thing was it wasn't because he had tripped over a root or anything. Wincing as a slow pain burned his lungs, Naruto placed a hand against his chest and took several deep breaths. Akane, realizing that Naruto was not running alongside her, stopped and turned around. When she saw his condition, she walked up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" she asked. Nodding just once, Naruto offered her a vaguely troubled smile. "I am okay. It is just that I used so much chakra that I am a bit tired." His hair had already turned blonde again, and his eyes had gone from purple to blue. He was no longer able to maintain his hybrid mode. That battle against those 5 ninja did expend more chakra than you ever used before. Placing her palm flat on his back, she rubbed his spine up and down. "While I can still feel plenty of chakra circulating through your body, your chakra coils are not used to channeling so much for such a long period of time. I imagine it feels rather like your insides are burning." "Yes, more or less. Then let us rest here for a bit." Akane stopped rubbing his back so she could grab his hand and tug him over to a tree. "In your current state, you won't be able to run very far for very long, and even if you manage to reach the battlefield, you won't be much help. Of course, that is assuming the battle isn't already over." As Akane sat down, she pulled Naruto down with her, unceremoniously shoving his head onto her lap. Not that he was going to resist. A lap pillow sounded nice right about now. The quiet atmosphere did wonders for Naruto's mind. He closed his eyes as Akane stroked his hair. The gentle motions of her fingers rubbing his scalp was like heaven. Some part of him wished they could forget about the battle and stay like this. However, as if to put a damper on those thoughts, a massive surge of chakra erupted all around them. It was faint. However, the faintness didn't come because the chakra signature was small. It was because whatever had suddenly appeared was just so far away. That alone caused the hairs on his neck to prickle. Naruto and Akane were forced to stand back up. "Wait here," Akane instructed before running up the tree she had been leaning against. The woman disappeared into the canopy, leaving Naruto alone. He had no idea how long he waited. It felt like hours, but he knew that was because he was just impatient. A few minutes had probably passed before Akane came down. Her expression was grave. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Konoha's forces are currently in trouble," Akane said slowly. "It seems 6 Biju have appeared near their location and are closing in fast." Naruto's heart leapt into his throat. XOX. It didn't take a genius to figure out that they were in trouble. There were 6 of the 9 Biju traveling their way. This was about as terrifying as it got. Yugito glanced at the faces of the ninja fighting alongside her, at rapidly paling skin and gaping mouths. Everyone else was in worse shape than her. Even Kakashi and the normally inscrutable Darui looked like they had swallowed something extraordinarily unpleasant. Knowing that she was the only one capable of dealing any damage to these creatures, Yugito quickly unleashed her chakra and transformed. All of the chakra congealed over her body. Rapidly expanding like a swelling balloon, her body grew taller and taller as her legs became thicker. It did not take very long, and before anyone else knew it, there was a giant fire cat with 2 tails standing in their midst. With a ferocious hiss, Yugito leapt forward, over the heads of the ninja below her. She landed at the edge of the clearing. From where she stood, she could see the other Biju much more clearly. They were still a couple of kilometers out. It was just as well. Opening her mouth, Yugito gathered the chakra around her. Streamers of black and white energy appeared around her mouth as though it was a black hole sucking in everything. A large orb soon appeared in front of her mouth. She swallowed it. Unlike when Naruto used this in his hybrid mode, her body didn't expand. Seconds later, she opened her mouth and unleashed an enormous beam of condensed energy at the 6 Biju traveling toward them. A massive explosion ripped through the air when her attack struck, and even though it was several kilometers away, the intense force of the blast caused those below her to cover their faces. Powerful winds surged and struck their bodies. Up ahead, her attack appeared as a massive dome of expanding energy. When the energy dissipated, there was TCH. It didn't work. Just as she had feared, the 6 Biju were mostly unharmed. The only one that appeared to have taken some damage was Shukaku. His sand body was deformed as though part of it had turned into glass. Already understanding what would happen if she let these Biju enter the battle, Yugito dashed forward, running on all fours. 2 of the 6 Biju opened their mouths in response to her actions. Chakra was gathering in massive amounts. Grimacing, she unleashed 2 bolts of fire that flew from her tails like arrows. They struck the condensed spheres. The energy from her chakra disrupted the spheres and caused them to detonate prematurely. She smiled when she noticed how the attack had blown off a chunk of their faces. By this point, she had finally reached these new enemies. Yugito didn't hesitate to wrap one of her 2 tails around Shukaku. The Biju shrieked as it tried to escape, but she tossed it into the air and launched a massive, blue fireball at it. While the fireball hit and damaged the Biju's massive body, her attention had unfortunately been focused on Shukaku. She didn't even see the danger until a blast of intense steam so hot it was like acid struck her in the side. A pained hiss escaped her lips. Turning, she saw the gobi staring at her. She was just about to attack when something strong clamped onto her left hind leg. Screaming in pain, she turned her head and glanced down. The Sanbi had chomped on her leg. She tried to shake him off, but then the giant fist of a red-furred ape slammed into her face. The force of the blow was such that Yugito was launched into the air, striking the ground several dozen meters away. She hissed and tried to get back up, but the Sanbi was still biting her leg. His teeth were sinking into her body. Even though this body was a construct made of chakra, it still hurt. At that moment, several shadows loomed over her, and Yugito looked up just in time to see 4 of the 6 Biju aiming a Bijudama at her. XOX. Yugito was not the only one in trouble. Barely a moment had passed since she raced forward to protect the ninja from this new threat when several thousand figures emerged from the forest. They were not the white Zetsus that everyone had been fighting before. These creatures didn't even look remotely human. Kakashi eyed the numerous strange beings who were now coming out of the woodworks. They were all bipedal and wore ragged clothing. Their skin was a dark brown. Each one of them had strange growths on their bodies. One had frills around his neck similar to a kind of lizard. There was another that had massive spikes protruding from his back as he stood over with a hunch. The arms of another looked grotesque and twisted, like a pair of claws that had numerous terrifying growths all over it. The amount of variation between these creatures was vast. However, Kakashi sensed that they all had one thing in common. "Are these Orochimaru's experiments?" he asked. Whatever these things were, all of them roared out in madness and rushed toward the mix of ninja and white Zetsus. They attacked with zeal. Kakashi saw one of his ninja being struck by a claw. The claw pierced through the flak jacket with ease, going all the way through the ninja's body and coming out the other side. That ninja died instantly. His carcass was cast aside seconds later, and the monster roared again before finding a new target. On his left, another ninja had been grabbed by a large monster with massive hands. An agonized and terrified scream tore from the ninja's throat. However, the monster showed no mercy as he grabbed the ninja's arms and ripped them off. Blood splattered everywhere as the wails increased in volume, before they were abruptly silenced when the ninja's head was crushed by a powerful fist. Rantan. Reiza Sakasu. Darui had already completed the hand seals necessary for a jutsu. The halo appeared in front of him, and several powerful beams shot out and struck the incoming horde of monsters. Each beam blasted a hole through one of the creatures, and then it curved and struck another one, and then another and another. However, with each consecutive attack, the energy charging it grew weaker. It eventually dissipated, though not before killing at least 10 of those monsters. While he was dealing with that, Samui, Omoi, and Karui were watching his back. There were still tens of thousands of white Zetsus to take care of. Samui already had her tanto out and was slashing at the white Zetsus. Lightning traveled along the length of the tanto, increasing its cutting power and allowing her to slice through her enemies with ease. Beside her, Omoi was also taking down as many white Zetsus as he could, even as he argued with Karui, whose fierce attacks were powerful enough that she could shear off limbs even without adding lightning chakra to her sword. Shoshoryu. Kamedachi no Jutsu, sickle weasel technique. Far to his left, Tenten and Tamari had leapt into the air. A pair of scrolls were spinning around Tenten's body. Hundreds or maybe even thousands of weapons were suddenly launched from the scrolls. During this time, Tamari swung her giant folding fan, manipulating the air currents, causing a powerful tornado to shoot from her fan. The tornado struck the weapons, increasing their speed and encasing them in cutting winds. All of those weapons were aimed with pinpoint precision at an enemy. They struck white Zetsus and those new experiments of Orochimaru's with incredible accuracy, and then went straight through their bodies. Nearly 100 enemies were felled in less than 2 seconds, and more were dying as the pair kept up their combination attack. At that moment, Sum and her squad came in from behind the group and rushed out to meet them. Their attack was premature, but given the situation, she had probably realized they could no longer afford to hold any cards back. She and her ninja dog charged into the enemy lines, their bodies spinning around with a savage ferocity as they tore apart anything that stood in their way. Teams 8 and 10 were also with her. Kiba and Akamaru were mimicking Sum in how they assaulted everything with powerful claws and their collaboration techniques. Meanwhile, Hinata was using her Juken and Shino was backing her up by having his Kikaichu drain the chakra of nearby enemies. They would swarm out, converge on one enemy, drain them dry, and then attack something else. While Team 8 was mostly using frontal assault tactics, Team 10 used restraining tactics. Shikamaru would use his shadow ninjutsu to hold them in place, and then Choji would slam into them by enlarging his fists and attacking with an incredibly powerful punch. Several of their enemies would try to sneak up on them during this time. However, Ino would use one of her mind jutsu to control an enemy from afar, forcing them to attack their allies. With the two teams were Asuma and Kurenai. They formed an odd pair that worked well in conjunction with each other. Kurenai would quickly trap White Zetsu and those monsters in a genjutsu, and Asuma would finish them off with his chakra blades. Unwilling to just stand around, Kakashi redid the hand seals required to activate the Reikiri. Lightning surged onto his hand. He grimaced as the drain on his chakra increased. How many times had he been forced to use this jutsu today? It seemed he would run out of chakra soon if this kept up. Taking a deep breath, Kakashi plunged headlong into the battle once again. XOX. Naruto and Akane could no longer afford to wait for his chakra to recover. Against his will, Akane was carrying him in her arms. He felt like a newlywed bride being carried to her new home. It was kind of humiliating, actually. Akane was blasting from tree to tree at a speed most ninja would have never been able to keep up with, her body enhanced with chakra. Even Naruto was impressed with her speed. It seemed she had been holding back on account of him not being as fast as her when the 5 kg level ninja had been chasing them. How much longer do you think it will take to reach the battle? He asked. Probably, about an hour or so, Akane admitted. Unlike before, her breathing was now quite heavy as she ran. She must have been going all out. It took them 6 hours of running to reach the Valley of the End. Hey, Naruto. Did you know those necklaces of yours are glowing? Huh. Naruto looked down at her words and felt shock jolt his body upon seeing that, indeed, the necklaces around his neck were glowing. He pulled them out. There were 9 necklaces in total, and all of them looked the same. 7 of them he had acquired when he was younger, but the last 2 had only been something he'd gotten within a few hours. It is like, they're responding to each other or something, Naruto murmured. Each of the necklaces pulsed as they jangled against each other. A few sparks emitted from them as they clacked together. How strange. I've never seen something like this. Have you? Akane bit her lip and shook her head, though she seemed a tad frustrated as she hopped to another branch and launched herself forward. I do not think so, but I also have this strange feeling that I have seen these before. It wasn't very strong until this moment, but, I don't know. Maybe I am mistaken. Wearing a slight frown, Naruto looked back at the necklaces and remembered how he had gotten the last 2. Take these, Nagato said as he held out 2 necklaces toward him. They were the same kind of necklaces that Naruto had. Why are you giving these to me? Asked Naruto, though he did grab them since the man was offering. You have 7 already, don't you? Nagato gestured to the necklaces hidden beneath Naruto's shirt. I do not know what they are. However, my mother and father said these necklaces were important relics of the past. There is a legend about a person who will bring all 9 necklaces together and unlock a mysterious power. Still leaning on Conan, he shrugged. I do not know what that power is, but if you already have 7 of them, then I imagine you are the one meant to find them. Naruto shook the memory away and stuffed the necklaces back into his shirt. Whatever these things are, it doesn't look like they are going to do anything right now. Let's hurry up and reach our companions so we can help them. You say, we, but I am the one doing all the work here, Akane teased. A bright red blush spread across Naruto's face. Shut up. XOX. A massive explosion went up, the force of which slammed into Yugito while she was in her Biju form. However, the explosion did not actually hit her. A large spear of sand had struck one of the Bijudamas, causing it to explode prematurely. This set off a chain reaction. One after another, the Bijudamas within the mouths of the Biju she was fighting against exploded. Yugito could do nothing but stare in shock as the explosions tore off the faces of the Biju she was fighting. Huge chunks of ash scattered all over the area, particles burst in colors of light, and her enemies all fell back seemingly in shock. After watching this strange phenomena, she turned her head to look at the person who had saved her. He was a man with red hair, green eyes, and the kanji for love tattooed over his head. His long-sleeved crimson coat and full-length dark trousers were well suited to a desert environment. A gray vest was held in place by a single strap over his left shoulder. There were 2 belts were being used to carry his gourd. You are, Gaara, right? The cage? Asked Yugito as she clambered to her feet. I am indeed, Gaara said, glancing at her as he stood on a platform made of sand. And you are Yugito ni, the Jinchuriki for the Nibi and one of Naruto's girlfriends. Yugito blushed, but Gaara didn't seem bothered. I have come with reinforcements. As he spoke, Yugito noticed that a large number of Suna shinobi had entered the battle down below. Numerous puppets were darting through the battlefield and attacking the white Zetsus. They swiftly engaged the enemies with swords, shields, and even poison. To her shock, she actually saw Sasori's puppet body darting around the clearing and taking down white Zetsus. There must have been at least 5,000 more ninja now than there used to be. I'm glad you are here, Yugito said. I really could use the help. Gaara nodded. The Biju are incredibly powerful beings. I will lend you my strength, but even with my powers, I do not know how we will do against 6 of them. That is fine. Yugito turned to face the Biju, who were all recovered and rearing to fight again. As long as we can stall them long enough for Akane and Naruto to reach us, I believe we will be fine. Then let us battle together, Gaara said. No more words were spoken between them. Yugito quickly darted forward, blasting off the ground to attack the nearest Biju, the Rokubi. She sent a wave of fire at the creature. The Rokubi opened its mouth and spat out massive amounts of water. Her wave of fire met the wave of water. As soon as the 2 attacks struck each other, a massive amount of steam billowed into the air with a sibilant hiss. Waving her tails, Yugito created several spears of fire above her head and launched them at the Rokubi. The spears pierced through the steam. They were so hot the steam evaporated. Traveling at a speed the Rokubi couldn't fathom, they penetrated deep into the Biju's flesh, igniting the creature's body, which appeared to have some highly flammable substances inside of it. As she attacked the Rokubi, Gaara wrapped his sand around Shukaku, lifted the creature into the air, and threw him at the Yonbi. The giant ape, which had been in the process of creating a powerful lava attack from its mouth, didn't even notice the Tanuki until it was too late. Shukaku slammed into the Yonbi and sent them both crashing to the ground. Unfortunately, there were still 3 more Biju that they had not been able to attack at the time. Gaara soon discovered the Nanabi was flying above him. The beast flew swiftly before he could attack, rammed into his chest, and knocked him off the sand platform he'd been standing on. Wincing as he felt his chest being compressed from the force of the Nanabi's attack, Gaara placed his hand on the Biju's hard body and, his chakra surging, he created a powerful sand spear that impaled the tailed beast. The Nanabi screeched and shook him off before ascending further into the sky. Still falling, Gaara summoned his sand platform once again and landed on it in a crouch. He rubbed his chest where the Nanabi had hit him. After having dealt with the Rokubi, Yugito slashed her claws at the Sanbi. Several powerful fire slashes burst from her paws. They traveled toward the Sanbi and struck the Biju's hard shell, but they didn't actually do any damage. Yugito narrowed her eyes. There wasn't even so much as a burn mark on the Sanbi's shell. I'll need something with more penetrating power if I want to hurt this one. Sensing danger, Yugito leapt backward just as the gobi rammed into the ground where she had been standing. Steam exploded everywhere. It was so hot that Yugito could feel it even though she was covered by the Nibi's chakra. Crouching down, Yugito extended the tails behind her and wrapped them around the gobi. Like Gaara had done to Shukaku, she lifted the five-tailed dolphin up and tossed it toward the Nanabi, who was flitting through the air and harassing Gaara. The two Biju crashed into each other, knocking them both to the ground. Before she could celebrate, Shukaku, the Yonbi, and the Rokubi had all recovered and converged on her. The Yonbi tried to engage her in a close combat fight. It came at her with its hands raised as though readying itself to pound her into the ground. Meanwhile, Shukaku and the Rokubi behind it prepared their respective attacks. Sand gathered in the one-tailed Biju's mouth and the Rokubi's chakra soared. Now that he was free from the Nanabi's attacks, Gaara created a gigantic hand above the Rokubi's head and sent it crashing down. The ground shook as a massive crater formed beneath the Biju. The Rokubi itself was crushed into the ground, its body flattening as if it was made of jelly. Yugito did not want to engage in a close combat match with the Yonbi. She leapt into the air before it could attack, and then opened her mouth. She gathered positive black chakra and negative white chakra to form sphere. Not wanting to be too destructive, she bit down on the Bijudama, compressed it inside of her mouth, and then fired it off as an intense beam. Her attack struck Shukaku. The beam tore through the Biju's body like it was made of paper instead of sand. A brilliant red line ran diagonally along the beast's body before the upper and lower halves suddenly split. As the upper half of its body crashed into the ground, the lower half revealed a smooth, glassy surface. The heat from her attack had been so intense that its body had turned to glass. Perhaps it was because she wasn't paying attention, but Yugito missed when the Nanabi recovered. Something powerful slammed into her back. She released a loud cry of pain as the powerful attack was transmitted through the Nibi's chakra and into her. Glancing up, she could not help but gnash her teeth when she saw the Nanabi, its wings flapping hard as it drove its horn further into her back. Sadly, she could not rely on Gaara for help in getting the Nanabi off her. He was busy trying to face off against the Gobi when the Rokubi recovered and released some kind of corrosive mist from its body. Gaara was forced to create a sand shell around his body to block off the effects. However, the mist was corroding even the sand, which sloughed off the dome-shaped shell. If this kept up, it would not be long before the dome would evaporate and Gaara would be struck. I guess it was foolish fighting against 6 Biju like this. She had known this, of course. It was incredibly dumb. Yugito was one Jinchuriki. Even if she had confidence in her own abilities, she knew there was a limit to how much she could do herself. In a one-on-one battle, she had confidence in her ability to take down a single Biju, but that was only if she could fight just one of them. Add in a second and she knew she'd lose. Fighting against 6 was basically suicide. Even with the added help of Gaara, the chances of their victory were slim. However, it wasn't like she could just give up either. She couldn't allow these creatures to attack the army behind her. Once they entered the battle, it would all be over. Yugito let out a roar as she smacked the Nanabi away with her flaming tails. Getting up, she launched a quick Bijudama at the Yonbi before it could attack her. The bullet-shaped jutsu slammed into the Biju's face and sent it back. However, before she could get another attack off, the Sanbi rolled itself into a ball and spun toward her. She managed to dodge the attack, but a sharp pain stabbed her side as the Gobi rammed into her torso. The attack was so powerful that she was lifted into the air and slammed against the ground several dozen meters away. As she struggled to her feet, Yugito saw that all 6 Biju were preparing to fire off their Bijudama. She winced as she stood up and prepared her own Bijudama. Sadly, even she knew there was no way her one attack could defeat their 6. It was more than just a matter of power. It was a matter of numbers. 1 against 6 was bad odds no matter how she thought about it. However, just before the attacks were fired off, 9 massive red tails flew through the air and slammed into the 6 Biju. The tails were powerful. When they struck the 6 Biju, each one of them was crushed against the ground. Trees were felled as the earth rumbled and shook. The ground around the 6 cracked and dented inwards, creating half a dozen craters that were about 2 times larger in diameter than the Biju being flattened. The tails quickly retracted. Yugito and Gaara followed the tails to their source. A giant fox with 9 tails, bristling red fur, long ears slightly similar to a rabbit's, and angry red eyes was walking majestically toward them. Its fox tails writhed behind it as it walked. This creature seemed unhurried, as if the 6-tailed beasts they were fighting weren't worth rushing over. "Akane?" Yugito asked. "I've come to help you out," Akane said. Her voice was loud and deeper than Yugito was used to, but that was definitely Akane. Yugito sighed in relief. "I appreciate that." Akane nodded. "Because these Biju are tied to a Jinchuriki that has been resurrected using the Kuchiyos, Edo Tensai, it is impossible to defeat them. They have a limitless amount of chakra at their disposal and regenerate from any damage taken. Naruto is currently searching for Orochimaru in order to force him to release the ninjutsu." As she spoke, the 6 Biju climbed to their feet. Just like she had said, all the damage they had taken throughout this battle was completely healed. Whereas Yugito felt like she had been battered and beaten, these beasts looked right as rain. "In that case, our job is to hold them off until Naruto can force Orochimaru to release the jutsu," Gaara said as he floated over to them. "That is it exactly." Akane nodded. "Well, at least the odds are now 2-1, Yugito mumbled. "I like that better than 3-1. Do not worry." Akane grinned, showing off her razor-sharp teeth. "I am the most powerful of the 9. I can take on at least 3 or 4 Biju myself, so you two only need to deal with one of them. If you think you can, I certainly won't stop you," Yugito muttered at the prideful tone in Akane's voice. "Let's go," Gaara said. As one, the 3 charged toward the 6 Biju, who had recovered by this point. Their clash created numerous massive explosions that rocked the battlefield several kilometers away. XOX. While Naruto hadn't fully recovered his chakra, he had enough that he could fight again, and it wasn't like he really had the option of just sitting around now that there were Biju attacking. Akane had gone off to help Yugito fight against the Biju. Naruto's job was to find Orochimaru, beat him to a pulp, and make him release his jutsu. They had already determined that he was responsible for this. Who else had the ability to reincarnate someone aside from him? Using his unique ability to see chakra, Naruto wandered the forest far from the battle. Even if he couldn't claim to know Orochimaru very well, he at the very least knew that this man wasn't the type to reveal himself during battle unless he wanted to accomplish a specific goal. That said, he also enjoyed watching the destruction he wrought. Naruto believed that meant Orochimaru would be far enough from the battle that he wouldn't get caught up in it, but close enough that he could watch unimpeded. It took him about half an hour before he located 2 chakra signatures several kilometers out. He needed another hour to reach that point. Since he was trying to conserve his chakra, he went more slowly than he normally would. The 2 people he'd discovered were standing on the cliff of a mountain some distance from the battle. They were studying the fight with the Biju as though it had happened merely for the sake of providing them with entertainment. However, as Naruto appeared before them, the 2 turned around. "Well, if it isn't Naruto Uzumaki," Orochimaru said with a wide grin. "How long has it been since you and I saw each other? You look like you've become much stronger." The way Orochimaru licked his lips made Naruto's skin crawl. "Orotem, I've come here to kick your ass and make you release the Edo Tensai," Naruto said. "Have you now?" Orochimaru looked amused. "Do you really think I would do that? What's more, do you really think you have the strength to make me do something I do not want to do?" As he spoke, his eyes suddenly turned blood red, revealing a pair of Sharingan with strange patterns inside instead of the normal Tomo. Naruto didn't look at the eyes. He knew he'd get trapped in a genjutsu if he did. "Whether I can or can't, I guess we'll find out soon enough. Now just hold on." Kabuto stepped forward and blocked Naruto's way. "If you'd like to fight against Lord Orochimaru, then you will have to fight me first. If you can't even defeat me, then you'll stand no chance against him." A frown formed on his face as he glanced at Kabuto, who had already created a set of chakra scalpels. He sighed. "If that is how you want it." There was a moment of silence that followed his words. Naruto and Kabuto stood several meters from each other, eyeing the other. While Kabuto seemed slightly tense, Naruto remained calm. He watched and waited for Kabuto to make the first move. That move came when Kabuto rushed toward him with explosive speed. The man had clearly been training, or maybe this was the result of undergoing numerous experiments. Naruto didn't know. As the man came in close, Naruto vanished before Kabuto's eyes, causing the medical ninja to slowly stop running. What the? Ranji Shigemi no Jutsu, Wild Lion's main technique. Naruto, who had suddenly appeared behind Kabuto, used chakra to temporarily enhance the metabolism on his head and manipulate his hair. His currently red hair grew longer. Several tendrils wrapped around Kabuto's arms, legs, torso, and neck. With another application of chakra, Naruto forced the hair to tighten. Kabuto grunted. Then, before the man could even think of getting himself out of them, the hair tightened to the point where it literally sliced through his body. As Kabuto was cut into bloody chunks that fell to the ground with meaty thuds, Naruto continued to eye Orochimaru, who didn't even seem to care that Kabuto was now dead. That was a little disappointing, Orochimaru admitted. While I didn't think he would win, I was expecting him to do a little better. Oh, well, I hope you are prepared to die, Naruto said. Orochimaru smiled. I do not believe I am, but that is okay because I also do not think you have the strength needed to kill me. I guess we'll just have to see. Naruto closed his eyes as he adopted an orthodox fighting stance. Releasing his chakra just a bit, he channeled the wind around him to create an invisible dome that covered a 10-kilometer radius. This allowed him to see everything without the need to use his eyes. He could see the way Orochimaru was studying his ninjutsu and even see the slight smile that man was wearing. My, what an interesting jutsu, Orochimaru murmured. By emitting a constant amount of wind chakra from your body and manipulating it, you can create a dome that acts as an incredibly detailed sonar to see everything. Only someone with your monstrous reserves would dare to think of using such a chakra-intensive jutsu. Of course, because your eyes are now closed, I cannot manipulate you with a genjutsu. That is correct. Naruto almost clicked his tongue. Fire ninjutsu also don't work since there isn't enough wind to fan the flames of a jutsu. Indeed. I noticed that. Naruto took a deep breath as he prepared to fight against Orochimaru, whose strength had no doubt increased far beyond what it had been before he acquired the Sharingan. There was no telling how many jutsu this man now knew. The silence between them was soon broken when Orochimaru thrust out his hands. Sanae Tajashi. A large number of snakes shot from Orochimaru's sleeves. They twined around each other to create two sturdy-looking pillars that nearly slammed into Naruto, who used his immense speed to get out of the way. Instead of crashing into him, they merely hit the tree behind him after passing through his after-image. Naruto appeared again and was already closing the distance between them. His speed was such that Orochimaru wasn't able to keep track of him. After forming a Rasengan in his hand, Naruto appeared in front of the snake Sannin and slammed his attack into the man's chest, or so it seemed. A mud clone. Naruto growled when Orochimaru's body turned into mud. He pried his hand from the mud clone's chest. Futon. Data but wind release great breakthrough. TCH. Clicking his tongue, Naruto spun around and thrust out his fists. Senpuken. Two powerful wind projectiles shaped like fists crashed against the powerful squall and forced it to disperse. Orochimaru, who was several meters above Naruto's head, didn't seem discouraged that his technique had been destroyed. He opened his mouth, from which a snake emerged. Then the snake opened its mouth and a sword appeared. Wrapping his hands around the hilt, Orochimaru pulled the sword out. As he descended, he swung it at Naruto, who avoided the attack by leaping backward. Risenshato. Creating a small Rasengan in front of him, Naruto fired off the jutsu, which sped toward Orochimaru faster than a kunai. It was dodged. However, the jutsu continued on, striking a tree and exploding with enough power that the entire tree shattered. Naruto used his attack as a distraction to close the distance between them and engage Orochimaru in a taijutsu battle. He thrust his left fist at Orochimaru. The man tilted his head to the side, avoiding the powerful blow, and then he knocked the hand away and took a single step forward. He thrust out his own hand, which had been tucked into his torso. The powerful palm thrust was blocked when Naruto leapt back and kicked it. Hand met foot and created a powerful shockwave that pushed the two of them back. Just then, Orochimaru threw the Kusanagi at Naruto. He ducked to dodge the attack, and then he rushed toward the snake Sannin, but he immediately diverted his course when the snake Sannin twitched his fingers. A whistling sound appeared behind him. Naruto turned his head and saw the Kusanagi passing through the spot where he'd been standing. It seems you have quick reflexes, Orochimaru complimented as he grabbed the kusanagi. Naruto didn't respond as he swung his hand down and created a powerful series of wind blades that shot toward Orochimaru. The man dodged them in a boneless manner. His body twisted and bent in ways that just didn't seem human. Closing the distance, Naruto kicked at Orochimaru's head, but it was avoided when the man's neck suddenly grew longer. After finishing a full rotation, Naruto slammed his foot against the ground and used that momentum to launch another kick at Orochimaru. This one was also blocked. He retracted his foot before Orochimaru could grab it and then proceeded to fire off a series of rapid punches. I do hope you don't think these weak attacks can do me in, Orochimaru taunted with a chuckle. Even if you have closed your eyes, the Sharingan's ability to predict your every move is not something you can avoid. I can see all of your attacks before you even make them. Can you really? Asked Naruto. Orochimaru frowned, and in that instant, something struck him from behind. As the man stumbled forward, Naruto used that moment to slam a Rasengan into his face. Unfortunately, it turned out this Orochimaru was just a mud clone. Clicking his tongue as Naruto realized this, he turned around to face his opponent, who stood several meters away. Of course I can. Orochimaru grinned. Did you really think I wouldn't see you trying to attack me with your hair? It was a good idea, but I've already seen this jutsu from Jiraiya many times. A sneak attack like that won't work on me. Naruto clicked his tongue. Orochimaru's smile widened. Now then, I would like to see how you deal with this, Amaterasu. As black fire poured from Orochimaru's eyes, Naruto found himself being forced to run backward. He was well aware of how powerful this black fire was. While he ran, he created a Rasengan in his hand, which he launched at the Amaterasu flames. His Rasengan struck the flames and detonated. However, it didn't disperse them. The black flames coagulated again and continued chasing after him. Not looking pleased by what happened, Naruto could only try to think of a way to stop those flames, but just as he was trying to figure out how he could stop the fire, another set of black flames appeared in front of him. Naruto was left with no time to dodge as the flames consumed him. Then he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Orochimaru still wore a smile as he turned around. Naruto rushed over and once more tried to engage him in a taijutsu battle. However, Orochimaru used the kusanagi to keep him at bay. Naruto frowned as he tried to seek out an opening in Orochimaru's defense. Finally, he found one when the snake Sannin overextended himself. He took a single step forward, created a Rasengan, and thrust it at Orochimaru. What? A hole suddenly erupted in Orochimaru's chest. Naruto's hand went straight through it. Then the hole closed around him and trapped his entire arm inside. Naruto was so shocked that he didn't have time to express his surprise when pain erupted in his chest. Looking down, he stared at the kusanagi that was piercing him all the way up to the hilt. Ku. You really are quite talented, Orochimaru complimented. If I had the same level of strength I used to have back then, I'm sure you would have been capable of killing me. However, now that I have the Sharingan, there is no way someone like you can defeat me. Now, a pair of snakes suddenly emerged from Orochimaru's sleeves. Let's open those eyes of yours, Naruto tried to think of how he could escape from this situation, but before he had the chance, Orochimaru's snakes wrapped around him, and then Orochimaru pried his eyelids open. Now forced to stare into his enemy's Sharingan eyes, he had no defense against what was going to happen. Allow me to see how long you can endure this torture, Naruto. I'm really curious to find out what sort of pain threshold you have. Tsukuyomi. XOX. When Orochimaru spoke that word, Naruto's vision went black. Everything around him vanished and the world became incredibly dark. He felt like he was floating through a void. Nothing seemed to exist, not even him. However, as he drifted along in this endless space, wondering what would happen now that he was trapped in Orochimaru's genjutsu, a light suddenly shone in the distance. Blinking several times, Naruto stared at this light, which appeared as nothing more than a small pinprick. The light soon expanded. Naruto wondered if the light was growing, or if maybe he was drifting closer to it. He couldn't tell. The light had soon expanded enough to fill half of his vision. At that moment, Naruto blinked, and then his settings changed. He was no longer drifting along a dark void. He was standing in the middle of a blank white space. What's more, he was not alone. A tall man with pale skin stood in front of him. Deep wrinkles lined his face and strong jawline. As the man shifted, his spiky, shoulder-length brown hair parted, and the braid behind him swung just a little. He was sporting a goatee, which gave him a very distinguished look. Naruto was kind of jealous. He would never be able to grow a goatee since he couldn't age. Perhaps more unusual than his goatee were the horn-like protrusions extending from either side of his forehead and pupilless white eyes, or maybe it was the red marking on his forehead. It looked vaguely like a Rinnegan. The white, full-length kimono he wore drifted around his ankles, folding and bending as he moved. A pattern was stitched onto it with 6 black magatama. On his back was a larger, black Rinnegan marking with a pattern of 9 magatama arranged in 3 rows of 3 beneath it. As Naruto stood there, staring dumbly at this man, the figure finally turned fully around. There was a smile on his face. "I have been waiting for you," he said in a deep, majestic voice that caused Naruto's bones to rumble. "You have?" Naruto scratched the back of his head. "Sorry, but I have absolutely no idea who you are." Chuckling just a bit, the man did not seem bothered. "I would be surprised if you did. My name is Hagoromo Utsutsuki. I am the last remnant to the spirit dwelling within those magatama you have now become the official owner of." "Magatama?" Naruto blinked. "I don't own any magatama." "Are you sure about that?" Hagoromo gestured toward Naruto's neck. Curious, Naruto looked down and found 9 magatama had mysteriously appeared around his neck. He rubbed his eyes, then looked again. Nope, they were still there. Where the hell did these come from? He cried out in shock. "Those 9 necklaces you found scattered across the world were the inactive magatama that I had left behind," Hagoromo said. "When all 9 of them were brought together, they were activated, allowing me to call you here. Unfortunately, I couldn't do so without that man's help." "That man? What man?" asked Naruto. "The one you are currently fighting." Hagoromo frowned, the wrinkles on his face growing long. "I believe you call him Orochimaru. He has stolen the eyes of a clan that one of my sons founded long ago. I used those eyes as a medium to pull you here." I don't really get it, but I guess you are saying that him activating the Tsukuyomi was a good thing," Naruto said. "More or less. So, I am guessing you brought me here for a reason." Naruto began. "I mean, you did bring me here, wherever this is, just where is this?" "This is a space that I have created for the purpose of meeting you," Hagoromo answered. "I knew that one day, one of my descendants would gather all the magatama together. Then I could meet them." "You said I'm your descendant. Does this mean I'm related to you?" asked Naruto. "That is correct." Hagoromo nodded. "Then how come I don't have horns and stuff?" Naruto gestured toward his head. Hagoromo chortled a little and shook his head. "The blood of my clan has been diluted after many centuries, so some of the extra appendages we have no longer appear." He paused. "The situation you have found yourself in is most unusual. What do you mean by that?" "Immortality." Hagoromo's single-word answer made Naruto freeze. "Among all my family, only my mother had gained immortality, though doing so ending up corrupting her, turning her body into an unfathomable monster known as the Jubi. She gained immortality by eating a fruit from the god tree, which not only granted her an eternal body but infinite power. I ended up being forced to seal the Jubi inside of myself. However, I did not gain Mother's immortality. At the end of my life, I created 9 beings by splitting Mother's power and scattering them across the world." The Biju. Naruto was stunned as this revelation struck him. "You created the Biju?" "I did indeed." Hagoromo smiled. "You catch on quick. I created the Biju. I had believed that it was better to have 9 less powerful creatures than it was to have one massively powerful monster roaming the land." He paused long enough to release a stressed sigh. "I did not expect people to begin sealing them away in order to use them as weapons." "You probably should have. People aren't that smart." As they spoke, Hagoromo's expression became a tad more wry. Naruto glanced at the white space they were in again. "Perhaps you are right," Hagoromo said at last. "However, I wanted to have faith in humanity. In either event, your situation is wholly unique. After having the Kyuubi sealed inside of you, Orochimaru forcefully messed with the seal, not knowing what he was actually doing, which caused the Kyuubi's chakra to forcibly transform your body into something that more closely resembles my mother." That last sentence of his made Naruto freeze. What does that mean exactly? It means that you gained the immortality my mother has. Hagoromo hummed softly to himself for a moment. Kyuubi, or I suppose I should say Akane, has the largest portion of my mother's power. This includes the incredible regeneration abilities that grant her an immortal body. The forcible transformation you underwent stimulated your cells and granted them a form of unlimited regeneration. In other words, immortality. Of course, you could only gain this immortality because you are of my blood. Had you been a normal ninja like that lady friend of yours, this transformation process would have killed you. Huh, I guess it's a good thing I'm not normal then. Naruto scratched the back of his head. A very good thing indeed. Hagoromo nodded. So, I hate to force this along, but I really am in a hurry. Naruto frowned at the man. What exactly am I here for? You are here because I needed to pass my powers along to someone, Hagoromo said. The last remnants of my soul have been trapped within these Magatama for a long time. I am tired and wish to rest. You, who have inherited my blood, are the person I wish to pass on this power to. Oh, Naruto needed a moment to figure out what he should say. Cool. Hagoromo rolled his eyes and sighed. What an enthusiastic response. Sorry for not acting super peppy. I was in the middle of a battle when I got sucked in here. Yes, I know. Let me just transfer my power to you, and then you can be on your way. Before Naruto could respond, an intense pressure suddenly slammed into him, forcing his knees to bend as he gritted his teeth. This feeling was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was a power so vast the pressure had become physical. What's more, an intense agony filled his head as the sensation of something being crammed into his brain eroded his ability to think. Images and thoughts raced through his mind. Names and theories. Knowledge. So much was crammed into his head. By the time the process had finished, Naruto was gasping for air as sweat poured down his face. What the fuck was that? Naruto shouted. That was all the knowledge you need in order to wield this power. Hagoromo walked up to him. And now that you have it, it is time for you to leave. Naruto opened his mouth to say something, but then Hagoromo slammed a palm into his face, and his body was jerked backward as if he was being lassoed by ninja wire. He soared out of that white space, back into the darkness, and then his physical body suddenly jerked. Once again the eyes of Orochimaru stared into his. He blinked. Orochimaru blinked. Why is my Tsukuyomi not working? Asked a confused Orochimaru. Hell if I know, Naruto responded. Maybe you are just bad at using it. Despite being confused as hell, Naruto didn't let himself get distracted. He knew what he needed to do. Rearing his head back, Naruto suddenly shoved it forward and slammed his noggin into Orochimaru's nose. There was a loud cracking sound as the man stumbled back. He let go of the sword in the process, which allowed Naruto to pull it out of his chest and shove it blade first into the ground. All right. Let's see if I can use that old man's powers. Calling up the knowledge that had been shoved into his head with little regard to his migraine, Naruto allowed his chakra to surge. He was surprised when it exploded from his body. It felt even more powerful than before. However, when he began creating those Gudodama, truth-seeking balls that were a part of the knowledge he'd acquired, he only managed to make 2 instead of the 10 that Hagoromo could create. The fuck? This is lame. Lame. Naruto grumbled as he looked at the 2 tiny spheres. He sighed. I guess even with all the knowledge I have, without actually practicing it, using this jutsu is too difficult. So that means, what? More training. What sort of jutsu is that? Asked Orochimaru, and Naruto totally remembered that he was in a battle. The snake Sannin was looking at his Gudodama with the obsessed fascination of a jutsu fanatic. I have never seen something like this before. What is it? How does that work? The chakra appears to be made of yin and yang elements. Would that make this an Omnyoten jutsu? Is such a thing even possible? Don't know. Naruto reached out and grabbed the 2 black spheres, which suddenly transformed into a pair of long katana. Does it matter? This jutsu, Orochimaru mumbled. I must see more of it. Then why don't you come over here, and I'll show it to you when I shove it down your throat. Naruto gestured toward Orochimaru. The snake Sannin was really too curious for his own good. He rushed at Naruto and tried to attack by relying on his Sharingan's perception abilities to stay ahead of his attacks. However, Naruto was far stronger now that he had inherited Hagoromo's power. His speed, strength, and reflexes had also grown along with his knowledge. Why is it that you suddenly seem so much more powerful? Asked Orochimaru. Tell me. It's because of Nanya, Naruto said as he dodged Orochimaru's palm thrusts. Nanya. Orochimaru frowned. What is Nanya? It means Nanya damn business. Using the man's confusion, Naruto swung his two swords, slicing off Orochimaru's arms. The man released a sudden scream as he stumbled back. Then Naruto rushed up and stabbed him in the chest. From the spot where Orochimaru was stabbed, a blackness seeped out, spreading from his chest to the rest of his body at a slow pace. Naruto thought it was blood at first, but that wasn't the case. As the blackness spread, he realized the skin itself was turning black as though it had begun rotting. It was like the flesh was undergoing necrosis. Orochimaru tried to speak. His mouth opened and closed, but perhaps because of what was happening to him, he couldn't do much more than that. Frowning a bit more, Naruto used the second blade in his other hand, swinging it horizontally and slicing Orochimaru's head clean off. He pulled his other sword out and watched as the head flew through the hair. It landed on the ground some meters away, rolling a bit before coming to a stop. Meanwhile, Orochimaru's body swayed before falling to the ground. After staring at the body and head, which he realized was actually Sasuke's, Naruto turned around and darted away from Orochimaru. He had a battle to fight. XOX. Naruto arrived at the site of the battlefield to see that Akane had joined Yugito in fighting against the Biju. Gaara was also with them, which surprised him a bit, but he put that out of his mind and quickly leapt into the air. Using wind chakra to propel himself forward, Naruto rushed toward the battle between giants. His red hair whipped around his face. He narrowed his purple eyes as he closed the distance. Holding out his hand, Naruto manipulated one of the Gudodama and sent it racing toward the nearest Biju, which happened to be the ape with 4 tails. His attack went straight through its body. The Yonbi paused as a hole appeared in its chest, and then, quite slowly, its body became ashen and gray before it crumpled into dust. A lull entered the large battle as Akane, Yugito, and Gaara turned to look at him. Naruto. Akane cried out in shock. Naruto waved at her. Hold on a second while I take care of this. Akane looked like she was going to ask Naruto what he meant, but he was already in the process of manipulating both Gudodama, which trembled a little before blasting off. His next 2 targets were the Gobi and Shukaku. His 2 black balls pierced the Biju and, just like what happened with the Yonbi, they disintegrated into ash. The remaining 3 Biju seemed to recognize the danger of his powers, and they quickly moved to avoid his attacks. However, Naruto was beginning to get the hang of these things. He quickly transformed one of the Gudodama into a massive Fuma shuriken that cut through the leg of the Sanbi. Even though his attack only lopped off a limb, this was enough to make it lose cohesion. It quickly crumpled. Then Naruto sent his other Gudodama at Rokubi. The slug shot some kind of liquid at it, but his Gudodama was made of yin-yang chakra. It sliced through the jutsu before slicing off the giant slug's head. Having seemed to realize it had met its match, the Nanabi flapped its wings and tried to run away. Oh, no you don't. Channeling wind chakra into his feet, Naruto created what appeared to be 2 tornadoes against his soles as he shot forward at speeds that made his gums flap. With his eyes narrowed, he summoned his Gudodama to him. Grabbing one with each hand, he transformed them into a pair of swords, which he crossed as he closed the distance between him and the Nanabi. Naruto sicked through the Nanabi's body with a cross attack. An X pattern formed on the Biju's body. Kicking his legs forward, Naruto stopped himself from flying forward and turned around to look at the Nanabi just as it fell apart into 4 pieces. Like the other Biju, it crumpled to ashes that scattered on the wind. These things are pretty badass, Naruto mumbled as he swung his Gudodama swords. It really is too bad I can't create more right now. Naruto. Akane and Yugito shouted as they raced over to him. Both of them were still in their Biju form. Akane looked like a giant-ass fox with 9 tails, and Yugito was a cat with 2 tails. Gaara was also coming over on his sand platform, but he was much slower than those 2. Hey, you two. Naruto grinned. This is a pretty wicked ability, isn't it? What happened to you? Asked Akane. Her voice was loud and rumbling, like lightning striking the ground in the distance. You seem much stronger now. Yeah, some weird stuff happened. Naruto grinned. I'm still kinda trying to understand it all myself. Anyway, I'll tell you about it later. For now, let's finish this battle. Akane, Gaara, and Yugito looked at each other before nodding. XOX. With Akane, Gaara, Naruto, and Yugito joining the battle, the Suna, Konoha, and Kumo forces were able to quickly eliminate the White Zetsu army and Orochimaru's experiments. Naruto created an army of shadow clones to aid the soldiers. Akane used her incredible powers as the Kyuubi. Yugito struck down enemies with a combination of her skill and Bijuu's powers. Meanwhile, Gaara used his sand to crush enemies. Several hours after they joined forces with the others, the battle came to an end. Given that his Gudodama were the only thing capable of severing a reincarnated ninja's bond with the body it was bound to, Naruto traveled with Akane to the giant orbs floating in the sky. He found that Nagato and Konan had already left. The orbs were still there, so he sent his Gudodama at them. The black spheres pierced each orb, which crumbled, and the shinobi inside of them disintegrated. There, Naruto sighed. Almost done. Now we just have to use these weird balls on your father and the other cages, right? Said Akane. Saying I have to use my balls on my father sounds kinda gross, Naruto admitted as he turned and began traveling to the Valley of the End. Akane followed him. So, are you finally going to tell me about where you got this weird power of yours? Asked Akane as they leapt from branch to branch. Naruto remained silent for a moment, but then he sighed and, realizing that Akane would keep bugging him until he told her, gave the woman a brief rundown of his meeting with that man called Hagoromo. Sounds sketchy, she said at last as they landed on a branch, leapt off, and landed on another. Some guy suddenly appears before you in a dream world after you have a genjutsu cast on you, says he's some extremely powerful person who sealed away his mom who had transformed into a monster, and he's passing his power onto you. Are you sure you didn't dream it? Who knows? Naruto shrugged. I mean, I could have, but then how do you explain this? With a gesture, he recreated the Gudodama that he had been using. They floated above his hand. Well, Akane grumbled as she found herself unable to dispute his words. They soon arrived at the Valley of the End. Dropping down from the ledge, they saw that the barrier ninjutsu Naruto had created was still in place. The four Hokages plus Sakuma were huddled together. As he and Akane wandered up to the glowing barrier, Naruto wondered what they were doing. And that's check, Minato said. Whaat. Hashirama grabbed his head and screamed. How did I lose again? You really suck at this, Minato muttered as he rubbed his head. Tobirama sighed. Hashirama has never been good at strategy games. He's almost as bad at shogi and go as he is at gambling. Those are two different things. Hashirama shouted. Since you lost, I guess that means it is my turn now, Sakumo said as he walked over to where Hashirama was crouching. Just one more game. Best 2 out of 3. Hashirama insisted. Sarutobi rubbed his head. You never change, do you? As he and Akane stood there, watching as Sakumo tried to pull Hashirama away from the shogi board with little success, Naruto felt a sense of surrealism overcome him. They were arguing over shogi. Granted, he had told them to play shogi before leaving, but he hadn't really expected them to do just that. I see you old geezers are having fun, Akane said loud enough for them to hear. The 5-cage level ninja glanced over at them. Naruto, Sarutobi greeted. If you're here, does that mean Orochimaru has been defeated? Asked Minato. Yup, Naruto said. I've also found a way to release the reincarnation jutsu, so I'll be sending you all back. Good. Hashirama stood up and stretched his arms. I'm honestly sick of remaining on the mortal plane. The dead are meant to remain dead. How do you plan on sending us back? Asked Sakumo. With these. Naruto lifted his hand and 2 black orbs appeared to hover over his palm. They spun around each other like a pair of satellites caught within the other's gravitational pull. Now that's an interesting jutsu. Never seen something like that before. Hashirama came right up to the barrier and looked at the orbs with a keen eye. Omnyoten jutsu. Something like that. Naruto nodded. You guys ready? Everyone gave him an affirmative nod, and so Naruto sent his Gudodama through the barrier. Because it was composed of his chakra, the barrier was not disrupted. Naruto first sent Sakumo back, and then he sent Tobirama and Hashirama back. Their bodies crumpled to dust after being struck by the black orbs. You've grown quite strong, Sarutobi said with a smile. Even though I don't appreciate being reincarnated like this, I'm glad I was able to see what a strong shinobi you have become. Yeah, Naruto gave the old Hokage a soft smile as he struck the man with his Gudodama. Me too. Sarutobi crumbled to dust, leaving just Minato as the last one present. The two of them stared at each other. Naruto hesitated to send this man back. There were so many things he wanted to say, but now that they were facing each other like this, he didn't know what he should say first. Naruto, Minato began, paused, and then smiled. It was a sad smile. I'm sorry for not being around. I wish things had been different. Also, I'm very proud of you. You've truly become a great man. Thanks, Dad, Naruto said softly. He sighed and, unable to say anything more, let his Gudodama gently strike his father. As he watched the body crumble away, he felt a slight ache in his chest. Are you okay? Asked Akane. I'm fine, Naruto murmured. Akane shook her head as if to say she didn't believe, but she didn't pursue the topic. What should we do now? For now, we'll head back to Konoha with the others, Naruto said with a shrug. After that, I guess I'll have to create that secret group I told Nagato I would make. Why did I say something so stupid again? Because you're an idiot. Ouch. Harsh much. With matching smiles, the two of them bickered all the way to the clearing. XOX. Two cloaked figures stood in front of a large bridge called the Naruto Bridge. Neither of them were wearing their hoods. One of them, a man with blonde hair, blue eyes, and whisker marks smiled as he looked at the bridge. The other, a gorgeous redhead with red eyes and pale skin, nearly sighed. I'm surprised this thing is still standing after 100 years, she said. With a name like this, of course it's going to withstand the test of time, the man laughed. The bridge itself was bustling with traffic. There were not only people walking across it, but there were also numerous cars traveling over the bridge as well. The man looked at the four-wheeled vehicles that drove along the center road and shook his head. Technology sure is something, he said. With the unification of the elemental nations, the people are beginning to create technologies that are more convenient, the woman said with a head tilt. She considered one of the cars as it drove past her, then shrugged. I guess now that they do not have to worry about war, they can afford to find other pursuits. I consider that a good thing. They walked along the bridge and soon reached Nami no Kuni proper. The flourishing city had grown a lot bigger since the last time they had visited. Many of the buildings were made from either brick or steel, or a combination of both. Quite a few towers had also been added into the mix. There were food stalls and vendors along the side of the road. Many people wandered down the streets, some window shopping while others stood in front of vendors and haggled prices. The two cloaked individuals watched everyone go about their daily lives. There are so many people, the man muttered. His companion rolled her eyes. You say that every time we stop in a large city. And it's always true. It wasn't long after wandering around the city that the pair decided they were hungry. They found a small stand to eat at near the docks. The loud sound of horns blowing and the scent of the sea made it appealing, at least to the man. The redhead didn't seem to care much. While the man ordered seafood ramen, 6 bowls of it, the woman ordered some katsudon. During the time it took her to finish one bowl, her companion had finished all 6, which caused the woman manning the stand to gape at him. That was good, the man sighed as he leaned against the counter. Rolling her eyes, the woman asked, what should we do now? Get a place to stay the night before wandering around. I don't know. The man frowned as he looked outside of the stand. There hasn't been a war in the last 50 years, and I haven't actually been required to do anything personally in the last 40. All you and I have done these days is travel. I'm pretty sure there isn't a single place in the elemental nations that we haven't been to at least 100 times. Probably not, the woman agreed. Numerous people wandered past the stand. A couple of kids raced between the legs of the adults, obviously playing a game of tag as they laughed and smiled. Couples held hands as they wandered by. There were a few elderly people chatting as they walked past the stand as well. To be honest, he began again, his voice soft, I'm a little sick of wandering like this. Yugito, Tamari, Tenten, Koyuki, Shizuka, Kakashi, Shizune, Sakura, everyone is already gone. Nagato lasted the longest, but I guess that was because of his Uzumaki blood. I feel like our time here is over, you know. Like maybe we should just stop and let the world continue on without us. Then what should we do? asked the woman. That was the question of the day. He really didn't know. However, as he gazed at the people passing the stand, something else caught his eyes, causing him to stand up and step outside. After a moment of hesitation, the woman followed him. What is it? She asked. The man stared at the massive ship stationed at the dock. Large and made of metal instead of wood, the vessel had several large smokestacks, from which large puffs of white steam emerged. It was painted in black and white. A boarding ramp had been extended from the ship to the docking bay. A lot of people were currently working on loading large crates onto it. Excuse me, Naruto stopped a passing pedestrian. Where is that ship from? I don't recognize it. That ship. The man he had stopped smiled. It's from a continent far away from here. I don't remember what the place is called, but they came to Nami about a year ago. So this ship isn't from the elemental nations? He asked, excitement in his voice. That's right, the man said. He thanked the man and let him go. Turning back to the woman beside him, he offered her an excited grin. Akane, how would you like to go on an adventure with me to explore new lands? He asked. Akane stared at him with a dull expression. Naruto, why are you even asking me that? Her lips curved upward in a beautiful smile that could have outshone the stars. You already know I'll follow you anywhere. Awesome. Then let's go. Grabbing the woman by the hand, Naruto pulled her along and hailed down one of the people loading crates onto the ship. It was time to start a new adventure. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next part.